The CEO was supposed to be asleep. That's what everyone thought when they passed her glass-walled office on the 42nd floor, slumped over her desk at 2 a.m., dead to the world. But Evelyn Cross wasn't asleep. She was hunting. Because the best way to see who people really are? Stop being the person they're afraid of. Most walked past without a second glance. Executives, security, even her own assistant. But then came the maintenance man, the one nobody noticed, and he did something that would unravel a $50 million fraud, destroy her inner circle, and prove that the most dangerous thing in a building full of lies is someone who still believes in doing the right thing when no one's watching. If you want to see how far loyalty goes when power isn't in the room, stay with me until the end. And drop a comment with your city. I want to know how far this story travels. Now hit that like button, because what happens next is going to shake everything. The heating system in the northeast corner of the 42nd floor had been acting up for 3 days. Evelyn Cross knew because she'd been the one sleeping in her office for the past week, and the cold had a way of seeping through expensive architecture when you were alone at 2 in the morning. The city outside her floor-to-ceiling windows looked like a grid of frozen light, Chicago in February, unforgiving and sharp. She told herself she was staying late to prepare for the Meridian merger. 8 months of negotiations, $200 million in projected value, her board breathing down her neck like wolves waiting for a kill. But that wasn't the whole truth. The truth was uglier. 3 weeks ago, her CFO had missed a call. Not a big deal, except Richard Chen never missed calls. 2 weeks ago, her head of acquisitions had rescheduled a meeting. Again, nothing alarming. But when you'd spent 15 years clawing your way to the top of a commercial real estate empire, you learned to read the silences between words. Something was off. Not wrong, exactly, just tilted, like a painting hung at the slightest angle, barely noticeable until you couldn't stop seeing it. So Evelyn had done what she always did when she needed clarity. She removed herself from the equation, told her assistant she'd be working from home, disabled her security detail, let the building think she was gone. Then she stayed. For 6 nights now, she'd been a ghost in her own company, watching, listening, pretending to sleep while the people who smiled at her in daylight revealed who they were in the dark. Most of them were predictable. Her VP of operations had used her private conference room to take a call with a headhunter. Her marketing director had spent 40 minutes on a video chat with someone who definitely wasn't his wife. Standard corporate rot. Disappointing, but not dangerous. But tonight felt different. Tonight the cold was worse. Evelyn had positioned herself carefully, slumped over her desk, head on her folded arms, laptop still open but dimmed. From the hallway, through the frosted glass walls that separated her office from the rest of the executive floor, she'd look like just another overworked CEO who'd passed out mid-email. She kept her breathing slow. Even. Her back to the door. At 1:47 a.m., she heard footsteps. Leather soles. Confident stride. Someone who belonged. The steps slowed as they approached her office, then stopped. Evelyn felt the weight of a gaze, assessing, calculating. Then the footsteps moved on. She waited 5 minutes. 10. Her neck was starting to cramp, but she didn't move. At 2:03, different footsteps. Softer. Rubber soles, probably work boots, slower pace. These stopped too. But they didn't leave. Evelyn heard the faint metallic click of her office door opening. She'd left it unlocked on purpose. Then nothing. Just presence. Someone standing in her doorway watching. Every muscle in her body wanted to turn, to confront, to reclaim her space. But she forced herself still. This was the whole point. To see what people did when they thought she couldn't see back. The footsteps moved into her office. Deliberate. Not sneaking, but not loud either. She heard the rustle of fabric, the soft scrape of something being set down. Then warmth. Something heavy and soft settled over her shoulders. A jacket, she realized. Someone had just draped their jacket over her like a blanket. Evelyn's mind spun. This wasn't what she'd expected. Not stealing, not snooping, not... The footsteps moved away from her toward the far corner of her office. She heard the quiet groan of the heating vent being opened, then the metallic clink of tools. Whoever this was, they were working on something, fixing something. She risked the smallest shift, just enough to crack one eye open beneath her arm. All she could see was a broad back and a navy work shirt, The building's maintenance logo stitched on the shoulder. Dark hair, maybe early 30s. He was crouched by the baseboard heater, doing something with a screwdriver and a small flashlight clamped between his teeth. The man worked in complete silence for maybe 10 minutes. Then he stood, tested something. She heard the faint hiss of steam starting to flow through the pipes, and nodded to himself. He walked back toward her desk. Evelyn snapped her eyes shut, forced her breathing to stay even. The footsteps stopped beside her chair. She felt him looking down at her, and it took everything she had not to tense. Then he did something that made her chest tighten in a way she wasn't prepared for. He gently adjusted the jacket on her shoulders, making sure it covered her completely, tucked it in just slightly around the edges. And then he left. Didn't try to wake her, didn't leave a note, didn't take a picture for leverage or gossip, just fixed her heat and made sure she'd stay warm, then walked away like it was the most natural thing in the world. Evelyn waited until his footsteps faded completely before she sat up. The jacket was heavy canvas, worn soft with age. It smelled like laundry detergent and something else, maybe sawdust or machine oil. Clean, but lived in. She looked at the heating vent. Warm air was flowing steadily now, taking the edge off the cold that had been gnawing at her for days. On her desk, barely visible in the dim light, was a small sticky note. She picked it up. Bleed valve was stuck. Should hold now. LC. That was it. No name, no number, no request for acknowledgement. Just a problem identified and solved, documented in 4 words. Evelyn sat in her chair for a long time, the jacket still draped over her shoulders, staring at that note. In 15 years of running this company, she'd been flattered, manipulated, lied to, and schemed against by people who wanted something from her. Money, power, access, favor. Everyone wanted something. But this man, whoever LC was, had wanted nothing, had given something instead, something small and human and utterly unnecessary in a building full of people who'd walked past her without a second thought. She pulled up the security logs on her laptop. It took her a few minutes to cross-reference the maintenance schedule with the building access records, but she found him. Liam Carter, age 34, facilities maintenance, 3rd shift. 5 years with the company, spotless record. No write-ups, no complaints, no drama. She pulled his employee photo. The face that looked back at her was quiet. Serious, but not cold. Dark eyes, strong jaw. The kind of face that didn't demand attention but earned it anyway. There was something in his expression, a steadiness, maybe. Like he'd learned early that the world didn't hand out second chances, so he'd better get it right the first time. Evelyn had built a career on reading people. It was how she'd survived in a male-dominated industry that had spent years trying to squeeze her out. She knew how to spot ambition, insecurity, hunger, fear. She could smell a scheme from 3 floors away. But this man? She couldn't read him at all, and that made him the most interesting person in the building. She folded the jacket carefully and set it on her desk. Tomorrow, she'd return it. Tonight, she had other problems. Because as she pulled up her calendar and stared at the Meridian merger files, that same tilted painting feeling crept back in. Something was wrong. She just didn't know what. Not yet. By 6 a.m., Evelyn had showered in the executive gym, changed into the spare suit she kept in her office, and erased all evidence that she'd been camping out like a paranoid insomniac. When her assistant arrived at 7:30, Evelyn was at her desk, looking every inch the polished, unshakable CEO the world expected. Morning, Miranda. Miranda Chen, no relation to the CFO, thank God, barely looked up from her tablet. You're here early. Couldn't sleep. What's on the board? Merger strategy session at 9, lunch with the mayor's office at noon, then the quarterly operations review at 3. Miranda paused. Also, Richard's been asking to move up the merger vote. He wants it on Friday's agenda instead of next month. Evelyn's hands stilled on her keyboard. Friday? That's 4 days from now. He says the window's closing. Market conditions, investor confidence, the usual. And what does legal say? They've signed off. Due diligence is complete, contracts are clean, everyone's ready to move. Everyone except me, Evelyn thought. Tell Richard I'll think about it, she said, and get me the full maintenance staff roster. 3rd shift. Miranda's eyebrow twitched, the only sign of surprise she ever showed. Maintenance? Security audit, Evelyn said smoothly. I want to review access protocols for non-executive personnel. I'll have it by 8:30. Miranda left, and Evelyn turned back to her screen. She pulled up the Meridian files again, hundreds of pages of financial projections, asset valuations, legal briefs. Everything looked perfect. Too perfect, maybe. She opened a separate window and started digging into the background checks. Meridian Solutions was a mid-sized logistics firm with solid contracts and steady growth. Their CEO, Marcus Webb, had a reputation for being ruthless but fair. No scandals, no lawsuits, no red flags. But something was still bothering her. She pulled up the company's internal server activity logs, a habit she'd developed years ago when a junior analyst had tried to sell proprietary data to a competitor. Most CEOs didn't bother with this level of detail, but Evelyn wasn't most CEOs. The log showed normal traffic, email, file sharing, remote access, nothing out of place. Except, there was a spike in network activity 3 weeks ago, right around the time Richard had started pushing harder for the merger. It wasn't huge, just a sustained increase in data transfer after hours, the kind of thing that could be a dozen different things. Software updates, cloud backups. Perfectly normal, but it was also the kind of thing someone would do if they were moving large files off-site without wanting to be noticed. Evelyn made a note and kept digging. At 8:30, Miranda dropped the maintenance roster on her desk. Evelyn scanned it quickly, found Liam Carter's name, and pulled his full file. The basics were there. Hired 5 years ago after a stint in the Army, trained as an electrical technician, current assignment covering the executive and residential floors. But it was the details that caught her attention. 4 commendations from building tenants for going above and beyond. A letter from the previous facilities director praising his exceptional problem-solving skills and integrity. A note in his file from 2 years ago about turning down a promotion to day shift because it conflicted with his daughter's school schedule. Daughter. Evelyn pulled up his emergency contact info. One name, Sophie Carter, age 8. No mother listed. Single father. She sat back in her chair, thinking. A man who turned down career advancement to be there for his kid. Who fixed problems in the middle of the night without being asked. Who gave away his jacket to a stranger because she looked cold. This wasn't just a maintenance worker. This was someone who'd built a life around a very specific set of principles. The kind of person who didn't cut corners because cutting corners meant someone might get hurt. The kind of person who might notice things other people missed. Evelyn picked up her phone and called down to facilities management. This is Ms. Cross. I need Liam Carter to do a walkthrough of the executive floor. Tell him there's been some temperature irregularities in my office. I want a full system check. The dispatcher sounded confused. Ma'am, Carter did a repair last night. His notes say the issue's resolved. Then consider this a follow-up. I want him here at 11. She hung up before they could argue. If Liam Carter was as observant as she thought, he'd notice when something didn't add up. And right now, Evelyn needed someone who could see what everyone else was ignoring, even if he didn't know that's what he was doing. Well, Liam Carter showed up at her office at 10:58. Evelyn had spent the past 2 hours in back-to-back meetings, watching Richard Chen pitch the merger to the board with the kind of smooth confidence that usually meant someone was selling you a bridge. Every number looked good. Every projection made sense. Everyone was nodding along. And yet, that painting was still crooked. When she got back to her office, Liam was waiting in the hallway, toolbox in hand. He was taller than she'd expected, maybe 6'1", with the kind of build that came from actual labor, not a gym membership. The employee photo hadn't done him justice. There was a presence to him, a quiet competence that made him easy to overlook if you weren't paying attention. But Evelyn was always paying attention. Mr. Carter, thanks for coming up. He nodded. Not a problem. Dispatcher said you're still having temperature issues? His voice was low, even. No deference, but no arrogance either. Just straightforward. Come in, she said, stepping aside. Liam walked into her office with the same measured pace she'd observed last night. He set his toolbox down by the heating vent and crouched, running a hand over the baseboard. This is the one I fixed last night, he said. Bleed valve was stuck. Should be flowing clean now. It is, Evelyn said. The heat's fine. Liam looked up at her, and for the first time she saw a flicker of confusion in his dark eyes. Then, what's the problem? Evelyn walked to her desk and picked up the canvas jacket she'd folded there. You left this. Understanding dawned on his face, followed immediately by something that looked like embarrassment. He stood, brushing dust off his hands. Right, sorry, I thought you were… He stopped. I didn't mean to overstep. You didn't. They stood there for a moment, and Evelyn realized she hadn't thought this part through. She'd wanted to see him in person, to confirm her read on him. But now that he was here, she wasn't sure what to say. Liam took the jacket, folded it over his arm. I'll get out of your way. Wait. He paused at the door. Evelyn made a decision. You notice things, details, problems other people miss. Liam's expression didn't change, but she saw him shift his weight slightly. Wary now. It's my job. I'm not talking about stuck valves. She walked closer, keeping her voice low. I'm talking about inconsistencies. Things that don't add up. Ms. Cross, have you noticed anything unusual in this building over the past few weeks? Anything that didn't feel right? Liam was quiet for a long moment. She could see him thinking, weighing whether to trust her. Finally, he said, You mean the server room? Evelyn's pulse kicked up. What about it? There's a maintenance closet on 37 that backs up to the main server room. I was doing a repair about 3 weeks ago, faulty circuit breaker, and I heard the cooling system kick on. Middle of the night, full blast, which doesn't make sense unless there's a major processing load. Could have been a scheduled backup. Could have been, Liam agreed, except it happened again 2 nights later, and then again last week, always between 2 and 4 a.m., always when the building's mostly empty. Evelyn felt something cold settle in her chest. And you didn't report it. To who? Building operations doesn't manage the servers. That's all IT and executive oversight. He met her eyes. And I didn't think it was my place to question what the people at the top were doing. But you noticed anyway, Evelyn thought, because you're the kind of person who can't help noticing when something's wrong. Show me, she said. Liam hesitated. Ms. Cross, if this is some kind of internal security thing, it's not. But I think you're right that something's wrong, and I need someone I can trust to help me figure out what. You don't know me. No, Evelyn said. But you gave me your jacket when you thought I was cold, and you fixed my heat without being asked. That tells me more than any background check ever could. Liam studied her face, and she let him. She knew what he'd see. A woman who'd learned early that vulnerability was a weapon if you didn't know how to hide it, but sometimes the best strategy was to stop hiding and see who stepped forward. 37, Liam said finally. Maintenance closet C. I can get us in, but we'll need to be quiet. Security does rounds every hour. Evelyn checked her watch. We have 40 minutes before my next meeting. That enough time? Should be. She grabbed her phone and her access card. Then let's go. They took the service elevator down to 37, bypassing the main lobby and the cameras that tracked executive movement. Liam swiped his maintenance keycard, and the doors opened onto a dimly lit hallway lined with utility closets and mechanical rooms. This way, he said. They moved quickly, Evelyn matching his pace. She'd worn heels this morning, a mistake she was regretting now, but she kept up. Liam stopped at a door marked Maintenance C, authorized personnel only. He unlocked it and ushered her inside. The closet was small, cramped with pipes and electrical panels. But Liam was right. She could hear the low hum of the server room's cooling system through the wall, louder than it should be in the middle of the day. There, Liam said, pointing to a ventilation grate near the ceiling. If you listen close, you can hear when the system spikes. Evelyn stepped closer. Over the steady hum, she caught it. A rhythmic surge, like a heartbeat. Data processing. A lot of it. How often does this happen? Last few weeks? Almost every night. Evelyn pulled out her phone and opened the building's network monitoring app, a tool most executives didn't even know existed, but she'd insisted on having access when she took over as CEO. She pulled up the real-time server activity. Normal. Everything looked completely normal. But if Liam was right, that meant someone was masking the actual load, running a shadow operation that didn't show up on official logs. Can you get me into the actual server room? She asked. Liam shook his head. That's restricted access. Biometric locks, security cameras, the whole setup. Only IT and a few executives have clearance. I have clearance. Then you don't need me. Yes, I do. Because if I walk in there during business hours, it'll raise flags. But if we go in during your shift, late at night when you're doing routine maintenance checks, that's breaking protocol, Liam said flatly. So is running unauthorized server operations in the middle of the night. Liam looked at her, his jaw tight. You really think someone in your company is doing something illegal? I think someone's doing something they don't want me to see, and I need to know what it is before I sign off on a $200 million merger in 4 days. The number seemed to hit him. Liam exhaled, looked at the ceiling, then back at her. If we get caught, I'll take full responsibility. You were following my direct orders. That won't protect me. Not really. No, Evelyn admitted. It won't. But I'm asking anyway, because I think you're the only person in this building who will tell me the truth, even if it costs you something. Liam was quiet for a long time. Then he said, Tonight, 2 a.m., service entrance on the east side. Bring dark clothes and leave your phone in your office. Why no phone? Because if someone's smart enough to run a hidden server operation, they're smart enough to track executive devices. He met her eyes. You want to do this quietly? Then we do it my way. Evelyn nodded. 2 a.m. Liam opened the door, checked the hallway, then gestured for her to follow. They made it back to the service elevator without seeing anyone. As the doors closed, Liam said, For what it's worth. I hope you're wrong. Evelyn watched the floor numbers climb. Me too. But she wasn't. She could feel it now, that tilted painting finally coming into focus. Someone in her company was running a con, and she was about to find out who, even if it meant tearing everything apart to do it. Evelyn didn't go home that night. She told Miranda she had paperwork to finish, then locked herself in her office and pretended to work while her mind spun through every possible scenario. By midnight, she'd changed into the dark jeans and sweater she kept in her gym bag, tied her hair back, and was pacing her office like a caged animal. At 1:30, she left her phone in her desk drawer exactly as Liam had instructed and took the stairs down to the east service entrance. The stairwell was cold and echoing, each footstep louder than it should have been. By the time she reached the ground floor, her heart was hammering against her ribs. Liam was already there, leaning against the wall near the loading dock, dressed in black cargo pants and a dark jacket. When he saw her, he straightened up but didn't smile. You sure about this? He asked. No, but we're doing it anyway. He pulled out a maintenance tablet from his bag. I clocked in for a routine system check 30 minutes ago. As far as anyone knows, I'm running diagnostics on the HVAC systems. We've got maybe 90 minutes before security does their next deep sweep. That enough time? Depends on what we find. They moved through the service corridors in silence, avoiding the main hallways where cameras tracked every movement. Liam knew this building like most people knew their own homes. Every blind spot, every maintenance access, every route that wouldn't show up on security logs. When they reached the 37th floor, he led her down a different hallway than before, stopping at a reinforced door marked Server Operations, Restricted Access. This is it, he said quietly. Your biometrics should get us in, but once we're inside, we can't stay long. The room logs every entry and exit. Evelyn pressed her palm against the scanner. There was a soft beep, then the heavy click of locks disengaging. The door swung open. The server room was colder than the rest of the building, kept at a constant 65 degrees to prevent overheating. Rows of black server racks stretched from floor to ceiling, their indicator lights blinking like 1,000 tiny eyes. The hum Liam had described was louder in here, a deep mechanical throb that Evelyn could feel in her chest. Over here, Liam said, moving toward the far corner where a separate rack stood slightly apart from the others. This one's different. See the ventilation setup? It's pulling more power than the others. Evelyn crouched beside him, studying the equipment. The server was running hot, its cooling fans working overtime. She checked the label on the rack. No identification number, no asset tag, nothing that would show up in the company's inventory system. This isn't supposed to be here, she said. No, and look at this. Liam pointed to a bundle of cables running from the rogue server into the wall. These aren't connected to the main network infrastructure. Someone set up a parallel system. Evelyn's mind raced. A hidden server, running independently from the main network, processing data that wouldn't show up on official logs. The kind of setup you'd use if you wanted to manipulate information without leaving a trace. She pulled a small flash drive from her pocket, one of the encrypted drives the IT department used for secure data transfers, and plugged it into the server's access port. "What are you doing?" Liam asked. "Getting evidence." The screen flickered to life, showing a command prompt. Evelyn's fingers moved across the keyboard, navigating through directories and file structures. She'd spent enough time in the trenches of her company's systems to know her way around, even if it wasn't her specialty. What she found made her stomach drop. Financial reports, hundreds of them. But they weren't the ones her team had been reviewing for the merger. These were different, older versions, with numbers that didn't match, revenue projections that had been inflated, asset valuations that had been manipulated, cost analyses that had been scrubbed clean of red flags. Someone had been creating two sets of books, one real, one fake, and the fake ones were the ones being presented to the board. "What is it?" Liam asked, reading her expression. "Fraud. Systematic, deliberate fraud." She kept scrolling, copying files as fast as the drive could process them. "Someone's been doctoring the Meridian merger documents, making it look like a better deal than it actually is." Why? Because if the merger goes through based on false numbers, Meridian gets a massive payout, and we get stuck with a company that's worth half what we paid for it. We'd lose everything. Liam was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Who benefits from that?" That was the question, wasn't it? Evelyn thought about Richard Chen pushing so hard to move up the vote, about her head of acquisitions suddenly unavailable, about the board members who'd been so eager to sign off without asking questions. I don't know yet, but whoever it is, they're on the inside. Someone with executive access and enough technical knowledge to set this up without getting caught. The flash drive beeped, transfer complete. Evelyn pulled it out and pocketed it, then started shutting down her access to cover their tracks. That's when she heard it. Footsteps in the hallway outside. Liam's head snapped toward the door. "Security. They're early." "How early?" 20 minutes. Evelyn's heart kicked into overdrive. She closed out the server interface and stood, looking around for another exit. But there wasn't one. The server room had a single entrance, and they were about to get trapped. "We can't get caught in here," she said. "If whoever's running this operation finds out we know, they'll destroy the evidence," Liam finished. "Or worse." The footsteps were getting closer. Liam grabbed her arm and pulled her toward a narrow gap between two server racks. "In here. Don't move. Don't breathe loud. Don't do anything." They squeezed into the cramped space just as the door opened. Through the gaps in the server racks, Evelyn could see two figures enter, one in a security uniform, the other in business casual. The second figure moved with the kind of confidence that came from belonging, not sneaking. Her blood turned to ice when she saw who it was. Richard Chen, her CFO. "Everything looked normal?" Richard asked the security guard. "Yes, sir. Just the usual maintenance access earlier. Carter from facilities. Logged for HVAC diagnostics." Richard walked over to the rogue server, checking something on his phone. "And the transfer?" "Completed an hour ago. The modified reports are now in the primary system. When the board reviews them tomorrow, they'll see exactly what we need them to see." Evelyn felt Liam go rigid beside her. She pressed her hand against his chest, a silent warning to stay still. "Good," Richard said. "Once the merger vote passes on Friday, we'll have 72 hours before anyone realizes what actually happened. By then, Meridian will have their payout, and we'll have our cut." "And Cross?" Richard's laugh was cold. "Evelyn's smart, but she's not smart enough to question her own CFO. She trusts the numbers because she trusts me. By the time she figures out what we did, it'll be too late to stop it." The security guard shifted uncomfortably. "What if she does figure it out?" "Then we make sure she can't prove anything. The beauty of this setup is that everything points back to Meridian's team. We're just the victims of their fraud, right? We did our due diligence, signed off in good faith, and got screwed. No one will blame us." "And the server?" "We'll wipe it after the vote. Remove the hardware, destroy the drives, eliminate any evidence this ever existed." Richard checked his watch. "Come on, I want to review the final presentations before tomorrow's board meeting." They left, the door closing with a heavy thunk. Evelyn and Liam waited in the gap between servers, not moving, barely breathing, until the footsteps faded completely. Then they waited another 5 minutes, just to be sure. When they finally emerged, Evelyn's hands were shaking. "Did you hear that?" she whispered. "Every word." Liam's voice was tight, controlled. "Your CFO is planning to tank your company for a payout. And frame Meridian for it." Evelyn pressed her palms against her eyes, trying to think through the shock. "Richard's been with me for 8 years. I trusted him. I brought him in from outside because I thought he was clean. People change when there's enough money on the table. How much do you think we're talking? If he's willing to destroy a $200 million company, more than most people see in a lifetime." Evelyn pulled out the flash drive, staring at it like it was a live grenade. "This is evidence, everything we need to stop the merger and expose what he's doing. Except you got it by breaking into a restricted area in the middle of the night," Liam said. "No warrant, no legal authority. Any lawyer worth their retainer will get it thrown out." "Then what do we do?" Liam was quiet for a moment, thinking. Then he said, "We need someone who has legal access to request a server audit. Someone Richard won't suspect. Everyone on the executive team reports to Richard or is already in his pocket. I can't trust any of them." "What about the board?" "The board's the one pushing for the merger. For all I know, some of them are involved." "Then we go outside," Liam said. "Federal regulators, SEC, someone who has the authority to investigate without tipping Richard off." Evelyn shook her head. "That takes time. Formal complaints, evidence chains, warrants. By the time they mobilize, Richard will have wiped everything and the merger will be done. We've got 3 days." "So what's your play?" That was the question. What could she do with evidence she couldn't use against someone who'd spent years building trust, with a board that was ready to vote in his favor? She thought about the maintenance worker standing beside her, the man who'd fixed her heat and offered his jacket, who'd noticed what everyone else had missed, the man who had nothing to gain from any of this except maybe losing his job for helping her. And she thought about what she'd built. 15 years of clawing her way up, fighting to prove she belonged in rooms that didn't want her. The company she'd reshaped into something she could be proud of. All of it about to collapse because she'd trusted the wrong person. No, she wasn't going to let that happen. "We go to war," Evelyn said quietly. Liam looked at her. "Meaning?" "Meaning Richard thinks I'm too trusting to see through him. So let's use that. We make him believe everything's fine, that the merger's going through exactly as planned. Meanwhile, we gather everything we can, financial records, communications, anything that builds a parallel case we can take public if we have to." "That's a hell of a risk." "Everything about this is a risk, but I'm not rolling over while someone destroys what I've built." She met his eyes. "Are you in?" Liam studied her face for a long moment. Then he said, "My daughter starts 3rd grade next year. I've been saving for 5 years to move us out of our apartment into something with a backyard. If I lose this job, you won't. You can't promise that." "No, but I can promise that if we don't stop this, a lot of good people are going to lose a lot more than jobs. Richard's not just stealing from the company. He's stealing from everyone who works here, everyone who depends on us. Your colleagues in maintenance, the security guards, the administrative staff. When this company crashes, they're the ones who'll suffer." Liam's jaw tightened. She could see the war happening behind his eyes, the instinct to protect what was his versus the instinct to do what was right. Finally, he said, "What do you need me to do?" Relief flooded through her. "Keep doing what you're doing. Run your maintenance rounds. Stay under the radar. Watch for anything unusual. If Richard's planning to wipe that server, he'll need technical help. Someone in IT or facilities will know something. And if they're loyal to him, then we find out who isn't. Everyone has a breaking point. We just need to figure out where it is." They left the server room the same way they'd come in, moving through the empty corridors like ghosts. When they reached the service entrance, Liam paused. "For what it's worth," he said, "I don't think you're too trusting. I think you're someone who expects people to be as good as you are. That's not a weakness." "It is if it blinds me to who they really are." "Maybe. Or maybe it means you haven't let this place turn you into someone you're not." He shifted his toolbox to his other hand. "My shift ends at 6. I'll keep my ears open, see what I can find out." "Be careful. If Richard even suspects—" "I know." Liam's expression was grim. "But you're right. Too many people are going to get hurt if we don't stop this. I can't just stand by and watch that happen. He left through the loading dock, disappearing into the pre-dawn darkness. Evelyn took the stairs back up to her office, her mind already spinning through the next steps. She needed to be smarter than Richard, faster than his timeline, and ruthless enough to beat him at his own game, and she needed to do it without letting him know she was coming. The sky was starting to lighten when she reached the 42nd floor. She retrieved her phone from her desk drawer and checked her messages. Nothing urgent. The world thought she was just another CEO grinding through late-night paperwork. If only they knew. She pulled up her calendar. Board meeting tomorrow at 9. The merger vote scheduled for Friday. 72 hours to dismantle a conspiracy and save her company. She'd faced worse odds before. At least that's what she told herself as she watched the sun rise over Chicago, the city waking up below her, unaware that the empire overlooking it was teetering on the edge of collapse. The morning passed in a blur of meetings and performance. Evelyn sat through the strategy session with Richard, nodding in all the right places while he presented the merger timeline. She smiled at his projections, asked thoughtful questions about integration plans, played the role of the supportive CEO who trusted her CFO completely. It made her sick. Richard was good, she'd give him that. His presentation was flawless, his numbers airtight. If she hadn't seen the real files on that hidden server, she'd have believed every word. Any concerns? Richard asked at the end, looking directly at her. None, Evelyn said smoothly. You've done excellent work, Richard. The board's going to be impressed. Something flickered in his eyes, satisfaction, maybe, or relief. I appreciate that. I know this timeline is aggressive, but I really think we need to move quickly. Market conditions won't stay favorable forever. I agree. Let's schedule the vote for Friday as planned. Richard smiled. I'll make sure legal has everything ready. The meeting broke up, and Evelyn watched him leave with the rest of the executive team, all of them chatting about lunch plans and weekend getaways, normal people doing normal things, none of them aware that their CFO was about to burn the company down. Except, Evelyn caught her head of operations lingering near the door, watching Richard with an expression that wasn't quite right. Not suspicious exactly, more like worried. David, she called. Got a minute? David Reeves turned, his usual easy confidence a little shaky around the edges. Of course. Evelyn closed the conference room door. How long have you worked here? 12 years. Why? Because I need to know if I can trust you. David's face went carefully blank. I'm not sure what you mean. The merger. Something doesn't feel right about how hard Richard's pushing. I'm not asking you to betray anyone. I just want to know if you've noticed anything unusual. For a long moment, David didn't speak. Then he said very quietly, I requested a copy of the preliminary due diligence report 3 weeks ago. Standard procedure for operations planning. Richard's office said they'd send it over, but they never did. When I followed up, I was told the report was being revised and I'd get the updated version. Did you? No. Every time I ask, there's another excuse, another revision, another delay. He met her eyes. I've been in operations long enough to know what that means. Someone doesn't want me to see what's in that report. Evelyn felt something click into place. Have you said anything to anyone? Who would I tell? Richard controls all the financial data. If I accuse him of hiding something without proof, I'm the one who looks paranoid. What if I told you I have proof? David went very still. Then I'd say you need to be extremely careful who you show it to. I'm showing it to you. Evelyn pulled out her phone and opened a secure file she'd uploaded from the flash drive earlier. These are the real numbers from the Meridian merger, the ones Richard doesn't want anyone to see. David took the phone, scrolling through the files. His face went pale. These projections are half of what he's been presenting to the board. I know. He's committing fraud, deliberate, systematic fraud. David looked up at her, and she could see the betrayal in his eyes. Why? Richard's pulling 7 figures a year. Why would he risk everything for... Because 7 figures isn't enough when someone's offering you 8 or 9 or whatever cut he's getting from Meridian for making this deal happen. David sat down heavily in one of the conference chairs. The board meeting tomorrow. If they approve this based on Richard's numbers, the company crashes within a year, and Richard walks away rich while everyone else loses everything. Evelyn sat across from him, I need help, David. I need people I can trust to help me stop this before Friday. What can I do? Operations has access to a lot of systems. Procurement records, vendor contracts, facilities data. I need you to dig through everything related to the merger and find anything that doesn't line up. Phone calls that weren't logged, payments that don't match invoices, meetings that happened off the books. You're building a case. I'm building ammunition. Because if Richard gets even a hint that I'm onto him, he'll destroy the evidence and accelerate his timeline. I need to be ready to bury him before he knows what's coming. David nodded slowly. I can do that. But Evelyn, if this goes wrong, it won't. You can't know that. You're right. I can't. But I know that doing nothing guarantees we lose. And I'm not ready to give up on this company just because one man decided to burn it down for profit. David stood, squaring his shoulders. I'll start digging, quietly. Be careful. Richard's smart, and he's been planning this for months. He'll have covered his tracks. Then it's a good thing I'm better at finding things people want to hide. David managed a tight smile. Operations sees everything, remember? We're just usually too busy to notice. He left, and Evelyn sat alone in the conference room, staring at her reflection in the polished table. She looked tired, worn down, like someone who'd been fighting for too long and wasn't sure how many rounds she had left in her. But she wasn't done yet. Her phone buzzed, a text from a number she didn't recognize. Shift change in maintenance. Overheard something. Can you meet? Liam, he'd gotten a burner phone. Smart. She typed back, where? Loading dock, 30 minutes. Evelyn grabbed her coat and took the service elevator down. The loading dock was empty except for Liam, who was leaning against a delivery truck, looking like he'd rather be anywhere else. What did you find? She asked. Richard requested a special cleaning crew for the server room, Liam said. Scheduled for Thursday night, after hours. The crew is external, not building staff. They're being paid triple the usual rate for a job that should take 2 hours max. He's planning to wipe the server, Evelyn said. That's what it looks like. The cleaning contract specifies complete equipment sanitization and disposal. That's code for destroying hardware. Can you stop it? Not without tipping him off, but I can document it. Photographs, timestamps, witness statements. If he destroys evidence, we can prove he did it intentionally. Evelyn thought fast. That's not enough. We need the server intact, which means we need to move the hardware before Thursday night. To where? I don't know yet, but somewhere Richard can't touch it. She paced the loading dock, thinking, what if we fake a maintenance emergency? Something that requires moving equipment for safety reasons? Liam considered that. A coolant leak would do it. Anything stored near the leak would need to be relocated temporarily to prevent damage. Can you stage one? It's risky. Building operations would investigate, and if they figure out it's fake, we don't need it to last long, just long enough to move the server to a secure location where Richard can't wipe it. Liam rubbed his jaw, thinking, I'd need help. At least one other person who can keep their mouth shut and won't ask questions. Do you have someone? Maybe. Martinez in electrical. He's solid and he owes me a favor. Then make it happen. Tomorrow night, during the board meeting. Everyone will be distracted and Richard won't be able to respond immediately. And after we move it, we keep it safe until Friday morning. Then we bring everything, the server, the files, the evidence, and we detonate Richard's entire operation in front of the board before they vote. Liam looked at her like she'd just suggested jumping off a building. That's insane. Probably, but it's also the only play we have. Richard thinks he's got this locked down. He thinks I'm too trusting to see through him. Let's prove him wrong. For a long moment, Liam didn't respond. Then he said, You know this could ruin you, right? Even if you're right. Even if you prove everything, there's going to be fallout. The board might decide you're the problem for not catching this sooner. Investors might lose faith. The whole thing could still crash and burn. I know. And you're doing it anyway. I'm doing it because it's right. Because Richard doesn't get to steal from people who trusted him. Because I'm not letting one man destroy what hundreds of people built. She met his eyes. And because you believed me when you didn't have to. You could have walked away, protected yourself and your daughter, stayed out of it. But you didn't. So yeah, I'm doing this anyway. Liam held her gaze for a moment, then nodded. Tomorrow night. I'll get the server moved. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. This whole thing still might blow up in our faces. He left, and Evelyn stood alone on the loading dock as the city moved around her, trucks rumbling past, people hurrying to wherever they needed to be, none of them knowing that somewhere in the tower above them, a war was brewing. She thought about Sophie, Liam's daughter, who didn't know her father was risking everything to do the right thing. About David, digging through files he wasn't supposed to see. About all the people in this building who showed up every day, did their jobs, trusted that the people at the top were looking out for them. They deserved better than Richard Chen, better than a CFO who saw them as collateral damage in his pursuit of a bigger payday. And Evelyn was going to make sure they got it, even if it cost her everything. The board meeting started at 9 sharp, and Evelyn walked into the conference room like she owned it. Because technically, she did. Or at least she had for the past 7 years. Whether she'd still own it after Friday was a question she couldn't afford to think about yet. Richard was already there, his presentation queued up on the screen, looking every inch the competent CFO who'd never stolen a dime in his life. He smiled when he saw her. "Morning, Evelyn. Ready to make history?" She smiled back, and it didn't even feel forced anymore. She'd had practice. "Absolutely. Let's show them what we've built." The board filed in over the next 10 minutes. 11 people who collectively held enough voting power to make or break the company. Evelyn knew each of them, their strengths, their blind spots, their pet concerns. Margaret Voss, who cared more about quarterly dividends than long-term strategy. Thomas Brennan, who'd vote however his golf buddies told him to. Jennifer Park, the only one sharp enough to ask real questions, which meant she was also the most dangerous if Richard had gotten to her first. Evelyn took her seat at the head of the table and watched Richard begin his presentation. He was good, better than good. He walked them through the merger benefits with the kind of confident precision that made you forget to question the numbers. Revenue projections that looked solid. Integration timelines that seemed reasonable. Risk assessments that somehow managed to make a $200 million bet look like a sure thing. And the whole time, Evelyn sat there nodding, asking supportive questions, playing the CEO, who trusted her CFO completely. It was the performance of her life. "As you can see," Richard said, advancing to his final slide, "the merger with Meridian Solutions positions us for 30% growth over the next 3 years. Our combined market share puts us in the top tier nationally, and the synergies in logistics management alone will save us $15 million annually." Margaret Voss leaned forward. "What's the downside risk?" "Minimal," Richard said smoothly. "We've done extensive due diligence. Meridian's financials are solid, their client base is stable, and their management team is experienced. The biggest risk is actually waiting too long and losing the opportunity to a competitor. Which is why we're proposing to move the vote to this Friday," Evelyn added, right on cue. She'd practiced this part. "Market conditions are favorable now, but they won't stay that way. We need to act while we have momentum." Jennifer Park was studying the projected numbers with the kind of focus that made Evelyn's stomach tighten. "These revenue projections seem aggressive. What's your confidence level on achieving them?" "High," Richard said. "We're being conservative, actually. If anything, these numbers underestimate our potential." Liar, Evelyn thought, but she kept her face neutral. "I've reviewed the analysis," she said aloud. "It's solid work. Richard and his team have been thorough." Jennifer looked at her, and for a second, Evelyn wondered if she could see through the act. But then Jennifer nodded and sat back. "If you're confident, Evelyn, that's good enough for me." The meeting continued for another hour, but the outcome was already decided. By the time they broke for lunch, the board had informally agreed to vote yes on Friday. All that remained was the formality of making it official. Richard caught up with her in the hallway afterward. "That went well." "You were very convincing," Evelyn said, and meant it. "I learned from the best." He paused. "Listen, I know this timeline has been stressful. I appreciate you trusting me on this." The words hit harder than they should have, because she had trusted him. For 8 years, she'd trusted Richard to handle the numbers while she focused on strategy. She'd trusted him with the company's financial health, with decisions that affected hundreds of employees, with access to information that could make or break everything. And he'd repaid that trust by setting up a shadow server to commit fraud. "Of course," she said. "That's what partnership is about, right? Trust. Richard smiled, and she wondered if he felt even a flicker of guilt. Probably not. People like him usually found a way to justify it. They'd convince themselves they deserved the money, that everyone else was doing it, that the rules didn't apply to them. Her phone buzzed. A text from Liam's burner number. Martinez is in. Staging the leak at 8 p.m. That gave her 11 hours. 11 hours to keep pretending everything was fine while Liam and Martinez moved a server full of evidence out from under Richard's nose. She excused herself and went back to her office. David was waiting, looking like he'd aged 5 years overnight. I found something, he said, closing the door behind him. Show me. David pulled out his laptop and opened a spreadsheet. 3 months ago, Richard's office authorized a payment to a consulting firm called Apex Strategic Solutions. $2 million for merger advisory services. I pulled the contract. It's all legitimate, proper approval chain, everything documented. So what's the problem? Apex Strategic Solutions doesn't exist. I mean, it exists on paper, incorporated in Delaware, registered address in New York. But when I dug deeper, the address is a mailbox service. No employees, no website, no clients other than us. The whole company is a shell. Evelyn felt ice in her veins. Richard's funneling money out. That's what it looks like. And it's not just Apex. I found 2 other consulting contracts over the past 6 months. Same pattern. Shell companies, legitimate-looking paperwork, payments that disappear into accounts I can't trace. How much total? At least $6 million. Maybe more if I keep digging. $6 million. That was Richard's cut, probably. Money siphoned off and hidden before the merger even went through. Insurance in case something went wrong. Can you prove the companies are shells? I can prove they don't have any real operations, but proving Richard set them up? That's harder. The incorporation documents list different names as executives. Could be Richard, could be partners, could be complete strangers he paid to sign paperwork. Evelyn thought for a moment. What about the payments? Who authorized them? Richard did, but that's not unusual. CFO has discretion on consulting contracts up to $5 million. He didn't need board approval. Which means he could steal $6 million and no one would question it because it looked like normal business expenses. Pretty much, yeah. Evelyn pulled up her own files, comparing David's findings to the data she'd copied from the hidden server. The timeline matched. Richard had started setting up shell companies right around the same time the Meridian merger discussions began, which meant this wasn't opportunistic. It was premeditated. Get me everything you can on those companies, she said. Incorporation records, bank account information if you can find it, any paper trail that connects them back to Richard. That's going to take time. You have until tomorrow morning. David's eyes widened. That's less than 24 hours. I know, but if we don't move fast, Richard's going to wipe the server evidence and we'll have nothing to stop the vote. What happens tomorrow morning? I'm going to walk into that board meeting and burn Richard's entire operation to the ground. But I need more than just the server data. I need the full picture, the fraud, the money laundering, everything, so he can't weasel out of it. David nodded slowly. I'll get it done. After he left, Evelyn sat at her desk and tried to organize her thoughts. She had pieces of the puzzle, but not the full picture yet. Richard was running fraud through the merger documents, funneling money through shell companies, and planning to destroy evidence before anyone could prove what he'd done. But she still didn't know who else was involved. Was it just Richard, or were there others? And what about Meridian? Were they in on it, or were they being played too? Her phone rang. Marcus Webb, Meridian's CEO. She almost didn't answer. But then she thought, what if Marcus didn't know? What if Richard had been playing both sides? Marcus, she said, picking up. How are you? Good, good. Listen, I wanted to touch base about Friday's vote. Richard mentioned you might have some last-minute concerns. Evelyn's blood went cold. Richard said that? Yeah, he called this morning. Said you were getting nervous about the timeline, wanted to push the vote back a few weeks. I told him that wasn't going to work for us. We've got investors breathing down our necks, and any delay could kill the deal. So Richard was already setting up his narrative. If Evelyn tried to stop the vote, he'd frame her as the unstable CEO getting cold feet. And if she went through with the vote, she'd be signing off on fraud. Richard misunderstood, Evelyn said carefully. I'm fully committed to Friday's timeline. That's good to hear, because between you and me, Evelyn, this merger is the best thing that could happen to both our companies. We're positioned to dominate the market. I agree. See you Friday. She hung up and stared at her phone. Richard was tightening the noose. Every move she made, he was 2 steps ahead, cutting off her options, which meant she needed to stop playing defense and start playing offense. At 7:30 that evening, Evelyn left her office and took the stairs down to the 37th floor. She'd changed into dark pants and a black sweater again, becoming a pattern now, this secret life she was living in her own building. Liam was already there, along with another man in maintenance coveralls who had to be Martinez. They were setting up equipment near the server room, working with the focused efficiency of people who knew exactly what they were doing. Status? Evelyn asked quietly. Coolant tanks are in position, Liam said. We'll trigger the leak at 8, let it run for about 10 minutes until building operations gets the alert. Then we go in as emergency response and relocate any equipment near the contamination zone, which includes Richard's server, along with about 6 other pieces of hardware, so it won't look targeted. We'll move everything to a storage facility off-site, somewhere Richard doesn't have access. Martinez looked up. You're the CEO, right? That's right. Just want to make sure I'm clear on something. If this goes south, I'm not taking the fall for corporate espionage or whatever. Liam said this was about catching fraud, not committing it. It is, Evelyn said. And if anyone asks questions, you tell them you are following direct orders from me. I'll take full responsibility. And if you're not around to take responsibility? It was a fair question. If Richard won, if the merger went through and the company collapsed, Evelyn might not be in a position to protect anyone. Then I'll make sure there's documentation proving you acted in good faith, she said. Legal memos, email trails, whatever you need. But I'm not planning to lose. Martinez studied her face, then nodded. All right, let's do this. At 8 o'clock, Liam triggered the coolant leak. It wasn't dramatic, just a slow, steady drip from one of the tanks that quickly spread across the floor. But the building sensors picked it up immediately, and within minutes, alarms were going off on every monitoring station. Evelyn watched from down the hall as building operations scrambled to respond. 2 technicians arrived within 5 minutes, assessed the situation, and immediately called for equipment relocation. Everything within 10 feet of the leak needs to be moved, one of them said into his radio. We've got chemical contamination protocols in effect. Liam and Martinez moved in, playing their roles perfectly. They started disconnecting equipment, labeling it, loading it onto rolling carts. The hidden server went onto a cart with 3 other pieces of hardware, and no one questioned it because it was all being treated the same way. Within 40 minutes, the server room had been cleared of anything near the leak. Liam and Martinez wheeled the carts toward the service elevator, and Evelyn followed at a distance, staying in the shadows. The loading dock was empty when they arrived. An unmarked van was waiting. Liam had arranged it through a friend who ran an equipment storage business. No questions asked. They loaded everything into the van, and Martinez secured it with straps. Where's it going? Evelyn asked. Storage unit in Pilsen, Liam said. Climate-controlled, 24-hour security, access limited to whoever I designate. It'll be safe until you need it. And the coolant leak? Cleanup crew will handle it tonight. Building operations will file a report. Insurance will process a claim. Everything by the book. No one's going to question why we relocated equipment during an emergency. Evelyn felt something loosen in her chest. They'd actually done it. They'd moved the evidence out from under Richard's nose, and he wouldn't even know until it was too late. Thank you, she said. Don't thank us yet, Martinez said, slamming the van doors shut. We still have to keep this quiet for 2 more days. That's a long time for secrets to stay buried. He wasn't wrong, but it was the best chance they had. The van pulled away, and Evelyn watched its taillights disappear into Chicago traffic. Somewhere in that van was everything she needed to stop Richard. Financial records, doctored reports, evidence of systematic fraud. Now she just had to figure out how to use it without getting destroyed in the process. She went back upstairs and found David still in his office, surrounded by printouts and spreadsheets, looking like he'd been mainlining coffee for the past 6 hours. Tell me you found something, she said. I found everything. David pushed a folder across his desk. Apex Strategic Solutions was incorporated by a law firm in Delaware that specializes in anonymous corporate structures. But I tracked the payment trail backward and found the account where our $2 million ended up. It's registered to a trust in the Cayman Islands. Can we connect it to Richard? Not directly, but the trust was created the same week Richard started negotiating the Meridian merger. And the trustee listed on the paperwork? Her name is Sarah Chen. Evelyn's stomach dropped. Richard's sister. Ex-wife, actually. They divorced 8 years ago, right before Richard came to work here. She's a corporate lawyer in New York, specializes in offshore asset protection. David pulled out another document. And 3 months ago, she filed paperwork to establish a new consulting firm. Guess what it's called? Apex Strategic Solutions. Bingo! Richard's been funneling money to his ex-wife's shell company, probably splitting the take. It's clean enough that no one would notice unless they were specifically looking for it. Evelyn felt the pieces clicking into place. Richard hadn't been working alone. He'd built an entire infrastructure to steal from the company. Shell companies, offshore accounts, a partner who knew how to hide money where regulators couldn't touch it. What about the other consulting contracts? Same pattern, different shell companies, but they all trace back to the same law firm, same trust structure. Richard's probably moved close to $8 million total. $8 million. Enough to disappear, to start over somewhere else, to never work another day in his life if he was smart about it. Can we prove it? In court? Maybe, with a good forensic accountant and 6 months of investigation? In a board meeting? Absolutely. The pattern is clear enough that even the dumbest board member will see Richard's been stealing. Then that's what we lead with tomorrow. Not the merger fraud. That's complicated. We lead with the theft. $8 million stolen through fake consulting contracts. That's simple, concrete, impossible to deny. David leaned back in his chair. You really think the board's going to side with you over Richard? I think the board is going to side with whoever has the most convincing evidence. And we're about to give them more evidence than they can ignore. And if they don't believe it, if they think you're manufacturing this to undermine the merger, then I walk out that door and call the SEC myself. Richard might win the battle, but he'll lose the war. Because once federal investigators start digging, they'll find everything, and the board knows that. David nodded slowly. All right. I'll have the full financial analysis ready by morning. Everything documented, every dollar traced, every connection mapped out. Good, because tomorrow we're ending this. Evelyn left David's office and went back to her own. It was almost midnight, and the building was quiet except for the hum of the HVAC system and the distant sound of a janitor's cart somewhere on the floor below. She stood at her window, looking out at the city. Chicago stretched out beneath her, a million lights in the darkness, each one representing someone's life. People working late in office buildings, families in apartments watching TV, bars full of people trying to forget their problems for a few hours. And somewhere out there, Richard Chen was probably sleeping soundly, convinced he'd gotten away with it. Evelyn thought about the people who worked in this building, the security guards who smiled at her every morning, the administrative assistants who kept the place running, the maintenance workers who fixed things no one else noticed, all of them doing their jobs, trusting that the people at the top were looking out for them. They deserved better than Richard Chen. Her phone buzzed. Another text from Liam's burner. Server is secure. Martinez is out. I'm staying on site in case anything comes up. She typed back, Go home to your daughter. You've done enough. His response came a minute later. She's at her grandmother's tonight. I'm staying. Evelyn stared at the message. This man, who had every reason to walk away, to protect himself and his kid, was staying because he thought it was the right thing to do. She didn't know how to process that. In her world, people made decisions based on calculation and self-interest. They weighed risks and rewards, protected their positions, covered their backs. They didn't stick around out of principle. But Liam did. And somehow that made her more determined to win. Because if she lost, he'd lose too. And that wasn't acceptable. She went to her desk and pulled up the files one more time. The hidden server data, David's financial analysis, the shell companies, the offshore accounts, the doctored merger documents. It was all there. Everything she needed to prove Richard was a thief and a fraud. But proof wasn't enough. She needed a strategy. The board meeting started at 9. Richard would present his final case for the merger, confident that he'd locked down enough votes to win. The board would ask their token questions, but they'd already made up their minds. which meant Evelyn had to hit them hard enough to change their minds, fast enough that Richard couldn't pivot, convincing enough that they couldn't dismiss her as paranoid or desperate. She opened a blank document and started outlining her presentation. Not a subtle build-up, not a careful argument, just a sledgehammer. Open with the theft. $8 million in fake consulting contracts. Richard's ex-wife's shell companies. The offshore accounts. Simple, concrete, undeniable. Then hit them with the merger fraud. The hidden server. The doctored financial reports. The real numbers showing Meridian was worth half what Richard claimed. And finally, the evidence destruction. Richard's plan to wipe the server Thursday night. The cleaning crew. The timeline. Hammer, hammer, hammer. Don't give the board time to process. Don't give Richard room to maneuver. Just overwhelm them with facts until they had no choice but to act. It was aggressive. Maybe too aggressive. But subtlety hadn't gotten her this far, and it wasn't going to save the company now. By 3 a.m., Evelyn had a presentation ready. 40 slides, every one of them a nail in Richard's coffin. She rehearsed it twice, timing herself, smoothing out the rough edges. Then she lay down on the couch in her office and tried to sleep. She managed maybe 2 hours before her alarm went off at 6. Her body felt like it had been run over by a truck, but her mind was sharp and cold and focused. This was it. The last round. Win or lose, everything would be decided in the next few hours. She showered, changed into her best suit, armor really, the kind of tailored perfection that made people take you seriously, whether they wanted to or not. She put on makeup to hide the exhaustion, pinned her hair back, looked at herself in the mirror. The woman staring back at her looked calm, controlled, like someone who knew exactly what she was doing. Evelyn hoped it was true. At 8:30, David knocked on her door. "Everything's ready. I uploaded the analysis to your presentation file." "Good. Are you coming to the meeting?" "Do you want me to?" "I want you to be prepared. If this goes the way I think it will, the board is going to have questions. Technical questions about the financial analysis, the paper trail, all of it. I need you there to back me up." David swallowed hard. "Richard's going to know I helped you." "Yes. He'll come after me, try to discredit me, maybe even file charges for unauthorized access to company files. He might, or he might be too busy defending himself to worry about you. Either way, I'll make sure you're protected." You can't promise that." "No," Evelyn admitted. "I can't. But I can promise that if we don't do this, Richard wins, and I don't think either of us can live with that." David was quiet for a long moment, then he straightened his shoulders and nodded. "All right, I'm in." At 8:50, Evelyn walked into the boardroom with David following behind her. Richard was already there, looking relaxed and confident. When he saw David, his eyebrows rose slightly, but he didn't say anything. The board filtered in. Margaret, Thomas, Jennifer, all the rest. 11 people who were about to decide the future of the company. Richard started his presentation at 9 sharp. He was polished, professional, hitting all the right notes. By the time he finished, half the board was nodding along. "Any questions before we move to the vote?" Richard asked. Evelyn stood up. "Actually, I have a few concerns I'd like to address before we proceed." Richard's smile didn't waver, but something flickered in his eyes. "Of course. Though I thought we'd already covered everything in our previous discussions." "We covered your version of everything," Evelyn said. "But there are some facts I think the board needs to see before making this decision." She walked to the front of the room and plugged in her laptop. Her presentation appeared on the screen. The first slide was simple, just 8 words. Meridian merger, the real numbers. Richard's smile finally faltered, and Evelyn began to speak. "Over the past 8 months," Evelyn began, her voice steady despite the adrenaline flooding her system, "this board has reviewed extensive documentation supporting the Meridian merger. Revenue projections, asset valuations, integration timelines, all of it presented by our CFO, Richard Chen, who assured us the numbers were solid." She clicked to the next slide. 2 columns of figures appeared, side by side. On the left are the projections Richard showed you. On the right are the actual numbers from Meridian's internal systems. Notice anything different? The room went quiet. Margaret Voss leaned forward, squinting at the screen. Thomas Brennan had gone pale. "Those can't be right," Richard said, his voice tight. "Where did you get those numbers?" "From a server in this building that you've been using to manipulate financial data." Evelyn clicked again. This server, to be specific, located on the 37th floor, running independently from our main network, processing modified reports every night between 2 and 4 a.m. Richard stood up. That's ridiculous. We don't have any unauthorized servers. If there was unusual network activity, IT would have flagged it. IT didn't flag it because you made sure they wouldn't. You set up a shadow system specifically designed to avoid detection. She looked at the board. But someone did notice. Someone who doesn't ignore problems just because they're inconvenient. Jennifer Park was studying the numbers with the intensity of a surgeon examining an X-ray. If these figures are accurate, Meridian is worth approximately half of what we've been told, which means this merger would bankrupt us within 18 months. Those figures aren't accurate, Richard said firmly. I don't know what Evelyn's playing at, but this is either a mistake or a deliberate attempt to sabotage a deal that threatens her control. It's neither, Evelyn said. It's the truth, and I can prove it. She clicked through the next series of slides, screenshots from the hidden server. File directories showing 2 sets of reports, one labeled internal, one labeled board presentation. Transaction logs showing when the files were modified and by whom. Richard's username appeared on every single modification. The room erupted. Board members talking over each other, some demanding explanations, others looking like they wanted to be anywhere else. Richard was shaking his head, his carefully maintained composure finally cracking. This is fabricated, he said. Someone set me up. Evelyn, I don't know what you think you found, but I found $8 million in fake consulting contracts. Evelyn cut him off. Payments to shell companies that don't exist, all authorized by you, all funneled into offshore accounts controlled by your ex-wife. Dead silence. Richard's face had gone from flushed to ashen. That's insane. You can't possibly. Apex Strategic Solutions, Evelyn said, advancing the slides. Incorporated 3 months ago in Delaware. Registered to Sarah Chen, who happens to be a corporate lawyer specializing in offshore asset protection, and also happens to be your ex-wife. $2 million paid for merger advisory services from a company with no employees, no office, no clients besides us. She clicked again. More shell companies, more payments, the entire web of theft laid out in stark black and white. There are 2 more just like it, she continued. Different names, same structure. You've been stealing from this company for months, Richard, and you were planning to cap it off with a fraudulent merger that would have destroyed everything while you walked away rich. Margaret Voss looked like she might be sick. Is this true? No, Richard said, but his voice had lost its confidence. This is a misunderstanding. Those consulting contracts were legitimate. If there were irregularities in how they were structured, that's a paperwork issue, not fraud. Then explain the hidden server, Jennifer Park said coldly. Explain why you've been running 2 sets of financial reports. I can't explain something that doesn't exist. Evelyn's obviously fabricated this entire narrative to block a merger she doesn't want. Why would I do that? Evelyn asked. The merger was my initiative. I'm the one who opened negotiations with Meridian. If I wanted to block it, I could have just said no. Because you realized it would dilute your control. This has always been about power for you, Evelyn. You can't stand the idea of sharing authority. It was a good play, Evelyn had to admit. Redirect the conversation from his crimes to her motives. Make it about personality instead of facts. But she'd expected it. David, she said, show them the payment trail. David stood up, visibly nervous but determined. He walked to the screen and pulled up a different set of documents. Bank records, incorporation filings, trust agreements. His hand shook slightly as he used the laser pointer. Every consulting payment authorized by Richard Chen follows the same pattern, he said. The money goes to a shell company registered through the same law firm. That shell company then transfers the funds to a trust in the Cayman Islands. The trustee on that trust is Sarah Chen, and the timing of these transfers corresponds exactly with key milestones in the merger negotiation. He clicked through the timeline. Payment to Apex right after the initial merger proposal. Payment to the second shell company after due diligence began. Payment to the third after the board gave preliminary approval. This isn't paperwork irregularities, David said. This is systematic theft disguised as legitimate business expenses. Thomas Brennan looked at Richard. Do you have an explanation for this? My ex-wife is a lawyer. I occasionally consult with her on corporate matters. That doesn't prove anything. It proves you've been funneling millions of dollars to offshore accounts through fake companies, Evelyn said. And that's before we get to the merger fraud. You keep saying fraud, but all I see are different versions of the same analysis. That's normal in deal making. We run multiple scenarios, adjust projections based on different assumptions. These aren't different scenarios, Jennifer interrupted. These are completely different valuations. Either Meridian is worth what you told us, or it's worth half that. It can't be both. Richard opened his mouth, then closed it. For the first time, he seemed to realize he was cornered. Evelyn pressed her advantage. Last night, you scheduled a cleaning crew to sanitize the server room. Triple rate, off-hours work, complete equipment disposal. You were planning to destroy the evidence before today's vote. How do you... Richard caught himself, but too late. How do I know? Because I moved the server before you could wipe it. It's in a secure location now, along with every file, every transaction log, every piece of evidence showing exactly what you've done. The room exploded again. This time, even Richard's supporters looked shaken. Margaret was demanding to see the original files. Thomas was asking about legal liability. Jennifer had her phone out, probably texting her lawyer. Richard sat down heavily, his face gray. For a long moment, he didn't speak. Then he said very quietly, "You have no idea what you've just done." "I saved this company from a con artist," Evelyn said. "That's what I've done. You've destroyed it. The merger was our best path forward. Without it, we're vulnerable. Competitors will circle. Investors will panic. You think you're protecting the company, but you've just signed its death warrant. The merger was built on lies. It would have collapsed anyway, except instead of failing now with a chance to recover, we'd have failed in 2 years with $200 million in debt and no way out." "You don't know that." "Yes, I do, because unlike you, I actually read the real numbers." Richard looked around the room, seeing nothing but hostile faces. Whatever support he'd had was gone. The board members who'd been nodding along to his presentation 20 minutes ago were now staring at him like he was a stranger. "I want to speak to my lawyer," he said. "You can speak to whoever you want," Margaret Voss said, her voice like ice. "After you're escorted from this building by security. Jennifer, call our legal team. Thomas, get HR on the line. We need to start termination proceedings immediately." "Wait," Richard said, standing up. "You can't just fire me without due process. I have a contract, I have rights. You have the right to leave quietly or be dragged out by security," Jennifer said. "Your choice." For a second, Evelyn thought Richard might actually fight. His hands were clenched, his jaw tight, every muscle in his body radiating fury. But then something shifted. The fight drained out of him, replaced by something that looked almost like relief. "Fine," he said. "But this isn't over. You think you've won, Evelyn, but you have no idea what's coming. The SEC will investigate. The investors will sue. The press will tear this company apart. And when it all crashes down, you'll be the one they blame. Not me." "Maybe," Evelyn said, "but at least I'll be able to sleep at night." Security arrived within minutes. 2 guards Evelyn recognized, both looking uncomfortable as they flanked Richard and escorted him out. He didn't resist, didn't make a scene, just walked out with his head high, like he was the victim of some terrible misunderstanding. The door closed behind him, and the room erupted into chaos. Board members were shouting questions, demanding answers, trying to figure out what happened next. Margaret wanted to know if they were legally exposed. Thomas wanted to know if they needed to notify shareholders. Jennifer was already drafting a statement for the press. Evelyn let them talk, let them process. This was the hard part. Not the confrontation, but the aftermath. The moment when everyone realized the crisis wasn't over, it was just beginning. Finally, Jennifer held up her hand. "Enough. We need to focus. Evelyn, what's the immediate risk?" "Legal exposure from the fraud, potential shareholder lawsuits, SEC investigation, possible criminal charges against Richard and anyone else involved." Evelyn ticked off the list on her fingers. "Plus the market reaction when this goes public, which could tank our stock price and make us vulnerable to acquisition." "So we're completely screwed," Thomas said. "We're damaged, not dead, but we need to move fast." "What do you propose?" Evelyn had been thinking about this all night. First, we bring in outside counsel, someone with no connection to Richard who can conduct an independent investigation. Second, we cooperate fully with any regulatory inquiries. Third, We go public with what happened before someone else does. Control the narrative. That'll destroy investor confidence, Margaret said. Investor confidence is already destroyed. We just don't know it yet. Better to get ahead of it than have someone leak the story in pieces. Jennifer was nodding. She's right. If we're transparent now, we might be able to salvage some credibility. But if we try to hide this and it comes out later, we're finished. What about Meridian? Thomas asked. Do they know? I don't think so, Evelyn said. I talked to Marcus Webb yesterday. He seemed genuinely surprised when I mentioned concerns. My guess is Richard was playing both sides, telling us Meridian was worth more than it is, telling Meridian we were desperate enough to overpay. So they're victims too. Probably, which might actually help us. If we can show Meridian was also being defrauded, it takes some of the heat off our due diligence failures. Margaret rubbed her temples. This is a nightmare. How did we not see this coming? Because Richard was good at his job, Evelyn said, and because we trusted him. That's not a weakness. That's how organizations are supposed to work. We just got unlucky that the person we trusted was willing to betray that trust. Unlucky, Margaret repeated bitterly. That's one word for it. The meeting continued for another 2 hours. They voted unanimously to terminate Richard's employment, to launch an internal investigation, to hire outside counsel. They drafted a preliminary statement for the press. They scheduled an emergency shareholder meeting. It was almost noon when they finally broke. Evelyn felt like she'd aged a decade in 3 hours. David caught up with her in the hallway. That was intense. That was just the opening act. Wait until the lawsuits start flying. Do you think Richard will flip? Try to cut a deal with prosecutors? Maybe, but he'd have to admit what he did first, and I'm not sure his ego will allow that. More likely he'll hire expensive lawyers and drag this out as long as possible. What happens to the company? Evelyn leaned against the wall, suddenly exhausted. Honestly, I don't know. Best case, we survive the investigation, pay some fines, rebuild investor confidence over the next year or two. Worst case, the damage is too severe and we end up getting acquired by a competitor at a fraction of our value. And you? I'll probably have to resign. The board will need a scapegoat, and the CEO who hired the fraudulent CFO is the obvious choice. David looked stricken. That's not fair. You're the one who caught him. Doesn't matter. Someone has to take responsibility, and it won't be the board members. They'll say I should have caught it sooner, should have had better oversight, should have questioned the numbers more aggressively, and they won't be entirely wrong. So you destroy your career to save the company. I protect the people who work here. That's the job. David shook his head. For what it's worth, I think you're doing the right thing. Thanks. That'll be a comfort when I'm testifying in front of the SEC. He smiled weakly. Need anything else from me? Get some sleep. We're going to have a lot of long days ahead. After David left, Evelyn went back to her office and closed the door. She stood at her window, looking out at the city, trying to process everything that had just happened. She'd won. Richard was gone. The fraud was exposed. The merger was stopped. She should feel triumphant, vindicated. Instead, she just felt tired. Her phone buzzed. Liam's burner number. Heard there was some excitement at the board meeting. She smiled despite herself. You could say that. How bad? CFO fired. Investigation launched. Company in crisis mode. The usual. Need anything? Evelyn thought about that. What did she need? A time machine to go back and choose a different CFO 8 years ago? A crystal ball to see if the company would survive the next 6 months? A guarantee that she hadn't just destroyed everything she'd built? She typed back. Just wanted to say thank you. None of this would have happened without you. I just fixed some heat and moved a server. You're the one who took the risk. We both took the risk. There was a long pause. Then, my shift ends at 2. If you want to talk, I'll be at the coffee shop on Monroe. Evelyn looked at her calendar. She had back-to-back meetings scheduled for the next 6 hours. Crisis management, damage control, all the unglamorous work of saving a company that most people would never see or appreciate. She canceled everything. At 2:15, she walked into a small coffee shop 3 blocks from her building. It was the kind of place that served actual coffee, not $16 lattes with foam art, and the clientele was mostly construction workers and taxi drivers grabbing caffeine between shifts. Liam was sitting in a corner booth, looking out of place in his work clothes, but somehow more real than anyone in Evelyn's usual orbit. When he saw her, he stood up. "Wasn't sure you'd come," he said. "Honestly, neither was I." She slid into the booth across from him, but I needed to get out of that building before I started screaming. "That bad?" "Worse. Richard's already threatening to sue. Half the board is covering their tracks, and I've got about 15 reporters camped outside waiting for a statement." A waitress came over, looking like she'd been working doubles for a week straight. "What can I get you?" "Coffee, black," Evelyn said. "Same," Liam added. They sat in silence until the coffee arrived. Evelyn wrapped her hands around the mug, grateful for the warmth. "So what happens now?" Liam asked. "Now comes the hard part. Internal investigation, regulatory compliance, trying to convince investors we're not completely incompetent. Could take months, maybe years." "And your job?" "Probably gone within a week. The board will want fresh leadership, someone who isn't associated with the scandal. It's politics. That's bullshit. You're the one who exposed it. Doesn't matter. Someone has to fall, and it won't be the board members who approved Richard's contracts without reading them." She took a sip of coffee. It was terrible, and somehow that made it perfect. "But you know what the worst part is? I still don't know who else was involved. Richard didn't do this alone. He had help, IT people to set up the server, maybe other executives to look the other way. And I have no idea who they are. Does it matter? Richard's gone. The fraud is stopped. It matters if they're still here, still in positions where they can cause damage." Evelyn rubbed her eyes. "I should have seen it coming. 8 years working with Richard, and I never suspected a thing. What does that say about my judgment?" "It says you're human. People trust the people they work with. That's normal." "Normal doesn't cut it when you're running a company. I'm supposed to be better than normal. I'm supposed to see things other people miss." Liam was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "You want to know what I think?" "Sure." "I think you spend so much time looking for the big threats that you miss the small ones. You're scanning for hostile takeovers and market crashes, and meanwhile someone's stealing from you one fake consulting contract at a time. It's not about being smarter. It's about paying attention to different things." "Like stuck heating valves." "Exactly. The little stuff that doesn't seem important until suddenly it is." Evelyn looked at him. Really looked at him. This man who'd fixed her heat in the middle of the night, who'd helped her steal a server from her own building, who'd risked his job because he thought it was the right thing to do. He had no reason to care about any of this, no stake in the company beyond a paycheck. But he'd cared anyway. "Why did you help me?" she asked. "You could have just walked away." Liam thought about it. "My daughter starts 3rd grade in September. Last week she asked me what I do for work. I told her I fix things in a big building. She asked if that was important, and I realized I didn't have a good answer. It is important. Buildings don't run without people like you." "Maybe, but it's maintenance, you know. I'm not building anything. I'm just keeping things from falling apart." And I started thinking, is that what I want to teach Sophie? That the best you can do is keep things from getting worse? He leaned back in the booth. "Then you asked for my help." And suddenly it wasn't just about fixing heat or moving equipment. It was about stopping something wrong, building something better. And yeah, it was risky. But if I'm going to teach my kid anything, I want it to be that sometimes you take risks for things that matter. Evelyn felt something tight in her chest loosen. "You're a good father." "I'm a tired father who probably should have stuck to fixing pipes." "No, you should have been doing this all along, solving problems, seeing patterns. You're wasted in maintenance." Liam smiled. "You offering me a job?" "Maybe, if I still have the authority to hire anyone after this week." "What would I even do?" "I don't have a business degree. I barely finished community college before I enlisted." "You have something better than a degree. You have integrity. You notice things. And you don't look the other way when something's wrong." Evelyn set down her coffee mug. "That's rarer than you think, especially in my world. Your world just fired its CFO for fraud. Maybe it needs better people." "It does, which is why I'm serious about the offer. I don't know what the role would be yet. But when this settles, if I'm still standing, I want you in a position where you're doing more than fixing heat. You're too good at seeing problems to waste that talent." Liam studied her face. "You really mean that?" "I really do." "What about Sophie?" "I can't take a job that means I'm never home." Then we make sure the job works around her schedule. You set the terms. I'll figure out how to make it work." For a long moment, Liam didn't say anything. Then he extended his hand across the table. "Deal, but only if you promise one thing." "What's that?" "When this all blows over, you take a vacation. Somewhere far away from Chicago, where nobody knows who you are and you can't check your email every 5 minutes. Evelyn laughed. It was the first real laugh she'd had in days. "I don't know if I remember how to do that." "Then you better learn, because if you burn out now, Richard wins. And I didn't risk my job just to watch you work yourself to death." "Fair enough. I'll try." "Good." They shook on it, and for the first time since this whole nightmare started, Evelyn felt something like hope. The next 3 days were brutal. The press had the story within hours. Someone on the board had leaked, probably trying to protect themselves by controlling the narrative. The headlines were predictably savage. CEO exposes massive fraud. Merger scandal rocks real estate giant. Millions stolen in elaborate scheme. The stock price dropped 18% in one day. Shareholders were threatening lawsuits. The SEC opened a formal investigation. Richard's lawyers released a statement claiming he was being made a scapegoat for institutional failures. Evelyn spent those days in conference rooms with lawyers, accountants, and PR consultants, all of them trying to contain the damage. She gave statements, answered questions, explained the timeline of events over and over until she could recite it in her sleep. And through it all, she kept waiting for the other shoe to drop. For someone to point out that she'd broken into the server room without authorization, that she'd moved company equipment without following proper protocols, that she'd technically committed the same kind of violations she was accusing Richard of. But no one did. Maybe because the evidence was too strong to ignore. Maybe because the board needed her to be the hero of this story, not another villain. Or maybe because sometimes doing the wrong thing for the right reasons was enough. On Friday morning, the day the merger vote was supposed to happen, Evelyn got a call from Marcus Webb. "I owe you an apology," he said without preamble. "For what?" "For not seeing what Richard was doing. I should have questioned the numbers more aggressively, should have insisted on independent verification. Instead, I just assumed your CFO was honest. You and me both. The thing is, my team did their own analysis after your board meeting. The real analysis, not the version Richard fed us. And you were right. Our company's worth maybe half of what he was claiming. If that merger had gone through, you'd have been stuck with a massive liability. And you'd have gotten a huge payout for selling us a lemon. Except we didn't know it was a lemon. Richard was playing us too. He told us you were desperate, that you needed this merger to survive. He said if we held firm on price, you'd cave. We thought we were negotiating hard. Turns out we were just pawns in his game." Evelyn leaned back in her chair. "So what now?" "Now we both lick our wounds and try to rebuild. But I wanted you to know, if you ever want to revisit a partnership down the line, once this mess is cleaned up, I'd be interested. A real partnership this time. Honest numbers, transparent process, the whole thing. I appreciate that, but right now I'm just trying to survive the week." "Fair enough. Take care of yourself, Evelyn. You did the right thing." After he hung up, Evelyn sat in her office, staring at the phone. She'd been so focused on stopping the merger, on exposing Richard, that she hadn't thought about what came after. But Marcus was right. Eventually, this would settle. The investigations would conclude, the lawsuits would be resolved, the company would stabilize. And then what? Her phone buzzed. A text from the board secretary. "Margaret Voss wants to see you. Her office, 4 p.m. Evelyn checked the time. 3 hours. Just enough to imagine every possible scenario. None of them good. At 4 o'clock sharp, she walked into Margaret's office. The board chair was sitting behind her desk, looking older than Evelyn remembered. The past week had aged all of them. "Close the door," Margaret said. Evelyn did. "I'll get right to it," Margaret continued. "The board met this morning. We've decided to ask for your resignation." There it was, the shoe finally dropping. "When?" Evelyn asked, keeping her voice level. "End of the month. That gives us time to find a replacement and manage the transition without creating more panic." Margaret's expression softened slightly. "For what it's worth, this isn't personal. You did the right thing exposing Richard, but the optics are terrible. The CEO who hired a fraudulent CFO Can't stay in charge, even if she's the one who caught him. The investors won't accept it. I understand. We'll structure it as a voluntary resignation. Generous severance, strong recommendation letter, the whole package. You'll land on your feet. And the company? We'll survive. It won't be pretty, but we'll survive. You made sure of that. Evelyn nodded. She'd known this was coming, had been preparing for it all week, but knowing and experiencing were different things. Can I make one request? She asked. What? There's a maintenance worker named Liam Carter, third shift facilities. He helped me uncover the fraud, put his job on the line to do the right thing. I want him protected, and I want him considered for a better position when things stabilize. Margaret made a note. Done. Anything else? Just one more thing. When you hire my replacement, make sure there's someone who pays attention to the small stuff, the stuck valves and the quiet observations. Because that's what saved this company. Not the big strategic vision, just someone who noticed when something didn't add up. I'll keep that in mind. Evelyn stood to leave. Evelyn, Margaret said, I mean it. You did the right thing. History will remember that. Maybe. Or maybe history will just remember that I hired a CFO who almost destroyed the company. Both can be true. Evelyn left Margaret's office and took the elevator down to the lobby. She walked past the security desk where guards who'd seen her every day for 7 years nodded respectfully. Past the directory where her name was still listed as CEO. Past the photos on the wall showing the company's growth over the past decade, growth she'd helped drive. She stepped outside into the cold March air. Spring was coming, but winter wasn't done yet. The city stretched out around her, indifferent and eternal. People hurrying past, focused on their own problems, their own lives. Somewhere up there, on the 42nd floor, her office sat empty. Soon, someone else would occupy it. Someone else would make the decisions, face the crises, carry the weight. But for now, for just this moment, Evelyn Cross was free. And she had no idea what came next. She went home for the first time in a week and slept for 14 hours straight. When she woke up, the sun was shining through her bedroom window, and for a moment she couldn't remember why she felt so heavy. Then it came back. The resignation, the end of everything she'd built. Her phone had 63 missed calls and twice as many emails. She ignored all of them and made coffee instead. The apartment felt strange. She'd bought it 5 years ago when she made CEO, picked it for the view and the commute time, not because it felt like home. Now, standing in the kitchen that she'd barely used, looking at furniture she'd hired someone else to choose, Evelyn realized she had no idea who she was outside of that office on the 42nd floor. The thought should have terrified her. Instead, it felt almost liberating. Her phone rang. Miranda's number. Evelyn almost didn't answer, but guilt won out. I heard, Miranda said without preamble. I'm sorry. Don't be. It was always going to end this way. Still, you deserved better. Miranda paused. There's something you should know. Richard's lawyers are trying to flip the narrative. They're claiming you knew about the consulting contracts, that you approved them, and now you're using him as a scapegoat to cover your own negligence. Evelyn's grip tightened on her coffee mug. That's bullshit. I know, but they're shopping the story to reporters, and some of them are biting. You might want to get ahead of it. Let them try. The evidence is clear. Evidence doesn't always matter when there's a better story. And CEO throws CFO under the bus to save herself is a better story than CEO catches fraud and loses her job anyway. Evelyn closed her eyes. Of course Richard would do this. He'd already lost everything. His job, his reputation, probably his freedom once the SEC finished their investigation. The only thing he had left was the ability to drag her down with him. What do you think I should do? She asked. Fight back. Go on record. Tell your side before Richard defines the narrative for you. I'm tired, Miranda. I don't have another fight in me. Then find one, because if you don't, Richard wins. And I didn't watch you work yourself half to death for the past week just so he could rewrite history. After they hung up, Evelyn sat on her couch and stared at the ceiling. Miranda was right. She needed to fight back. But the thought of more interviews, more questions, more defending herself against accusations from a man who'd stolen millions felt like trying to climb a mountain with a broken leg. Her phone buzzed again. Liam's burner number. Saw the news. You okay? She typed back. Define okay. Fair point. Want company? Sophie's at a birthday party until 5. Evelyn looked around her empty apartment. Sure, I'll send you the address. Liam showed up 20 minutes later with a bag of takeout from a Thai place she'd never heard of. Figured you hadn't eaten anything that wasn't from a vending machine in a while. You're not wrong. She let him in, suddenly self-conscious about the expensive minimalist furniture and the art she'd never really looked at. Place is kind of sterile, isn't it? It's very clean, Liam said diplomatically. Where should I put this? They ate at her kitchen island, which Evelyn was pretty sure she'd never actually used for a meal before. The food was good, spicy and real in a way that made her realize how much she'd been living on coffee and adrenaline. So, Liam said, what now? I have no idea. The board wants me gone by the end of the month. After that, I'm unemployed for the first time since college. Could be worse. You could be Richard. Richard's probably in the Caymans by now, living off his stolen millions. Actually, he's in federal custody. They arrested him this morning. Apparently, the SEC moved faster than anyone expected. Evelyn set down her fork. You're kidding. Saw it on the news. Flight risk, they said. He was trying to board a plane to Singapore when they picked him up. Singapore doesn't have an extradition treaty with the U.S. Yeah, that probably didn't help his I'm innocent defense. Evelyn felt something unknot in her chest. Richard was done. Really done. No more lawyers, no more narrative spinning, no more trying to drag her down with him. Does that make you feel better? Liam asked. Honestly? Yeah, it does. Which probably makes me a terrible person. Or just a human one. He tried to destroy you. You're allowed to enjoy watching him fail. They finished eating in comfortable silence. Then Liam said, Can I ask you something? Why'd you really stay in that office for a week? You could have gone home, kept running the company from a distance. Why put yourself through sleeping on a couch and freezing in the middle of the night? Evelyn thought about it. Because I needed to see who people were when they thought I wasn't watching. I'd spent so long being the CEO, being the person everyone performed for, that I'd lost track of what was real. I needed to strip away the performance and see what was underneath. And what did you find? That most people are exactly who they seem to be. Some good, some bad, most just trying to get through the day. And that the person I'd trusted most had been lying to me for months while I smiled and nodded and never questioned him. That's not your fault. Isn't it? I hired him. I gave him authority. I ignored warning signs because it was easier than confronting someone I considered a partner. You trusted someone who betrayed that trust. That's on him, not you. Tell that to the board. Tell that to the investors who lost 18% in a week. Tell that to the employees who are worried about their jobs because their CEO was too blind to see what was happening under her nose. Liam leaned back in his chair. You know what I think? I think you're so used to carrying everything that you don't know how to put anything down. Someone has to be responsible, so it might as well be you. Someone has to take the blame, so it might as well be you. Someone has to sacrifice their career to protect everyone else, so it might as well be you. That's my job. No, your job was to run a company, which you did. And when you found out someone was stealing, you stopped them. That's not failure, that's success. But you can't see it because you're too busy punishing yourself for not being perfect. Evelyn felt something sting behind her eyes. I'm not punishing myself. Really? Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you're doing Richard's work for him. He wanted to destroy you, and you're helping by refusing to defend yourself, refusing to fight back, refusing to believe that maybe, just maybe, you're the hero of this story and not the villain. I'm not a hero. I'm just someone who did what needed to be done. That's what heroes are, Liam said quietly. People who do what needs to be done, even when it costs them everything. Evelyn looked at him, this maintenance worker who'd fixed her heat and moved a server and risked his job because he thought it was right. Who saw through her armor to the person underneath and refused to let her hide. Why do you care? She asked. You barely know me. I know enough. I know you gave me your trust when you didn't have to. I know you fought to save people who'll never thank you for it. I know you're sitting here beating yourself up when you should be celebrating the fact that you just stopped a massive fraud. He met her eyes. And I know that if someone like you gives up, it means the Richard Chens of the world win. And I'm not okay with that. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then Evelyn said, "Miranda thinks I should go on record. Tell my side before Richard's lawyers rewrite the story." "Do you want to?" "I want to never think about any of this again. I want to sleep for a month and wake up in a world where I don't have to defend every decision I made." But you're right. If I don't fight back, Richard wins. And I didn't go through all this just to let him have the last word. Liam smiled. "There she is." "There who is?" "The woman who walked into that board meeting and detonated a CFO's entire life. She's been hiding under all this guilt and self-doubt, but she's still there." Evelyn couldn't help but smile back. "You're very annoying, you know that?" "Sophie tells me that at least twice a day." "Smart kid." "She is, which is why I'm hoping you'll meet her sometime. If you're sticking around Chicago, I mean." Something warm spread through Evelyn's chest. "I'd like that." "Good, because she's been asking about the woman I've been texting on the burner phone, and I'm running out of vague explanations." "What have you been telling her?" "That I'm helping a friend with a work problem, which is technically true, just missing about 90% of the context." "Probably for the best. Daddy helped expose corporate fraud isn't exactly bedtime story material. Give it a few years. By the time she's in high school, this will make a great learn from my mistakes lesson." They talked for another hour, the conversation drifting from the scandal to easier topics. Liam told her about Sophie's obsession with space exploration, about the apartment he was hoping to move out of, about his plans to maybe go back to school now that things had stabilized. Evelyn told him about the vacation she'd promised to take, about the consulting offers that were already starting to trickle in, about her complete inability to relax even when she knew she needed to. It was normal, human. The kind of conversation she hadn't had in years because she'd been too busy being the CEO to just be a person. When Liam left to pick up Sophie, Evelyn sat down and opened her laptop. She drafted an email to a reporter she trusted, laying out the timeline of the fraud, the discovery process, the decision to expose Richard. Not defensive, not angry, just clear and factual and honest. She read it over 3 times, then hit send before she could second-guess herself. The next morning, the story ran on the front page of the business section. CEO turned whistleblower. How Evelyn Cross saved her company. It wasn't perfect. The headline was more dramatic than she would have liked, but it was fair, accurate. Her side of the story finally on record. By noon, 3 other outlets had picked it up. By evening, Richard's lawyers had issued a statement calling it a desperate attempt at reputation management, but the damage was done. The narrative had shifted. Evelyn wasn't the incompetent CEO who'd missed the signs. She was the whistleblower who'd risked everything to stop a fraud. Miranda called. "Well done. You're trending on LinkedIn. Is that good? In this case, yes. People are calling you courageous. There's even a hashtag." "Please don't tell me what it is. Too late. It's hashtag crossing the line. Someone made a meme." Evelyn groaned. "I hate the internet." "The internet loves you right now. Enjoy it while it lasts." Over the next 3 weeks, things slowly began to settle. The SEC investigation continued, but the focus was clearly on Richard, not the company. Several other executives who'd been peripherally involved resigned quietly. David was promoted to interim CFO, and he immediately started implementing new oversight protocols to prevent anything like this from happening again. The stock price stabilized, then started to climb. Investor confidence returned as it became clear the company would survive. New leadership was announced, a respected industry veteran who'd turned around 2 struggling firms and had a reputation for clean operations. And Evelyn prepared to leave. She spent her final days in the office organizing files, documenting decisions, making sure the transition would be as smooth as possible. People stopped by to thank her, to tell her she'd done the right thing, to promise they'd never forget what she'd sacrificed. It should have felt like closure. Instead, it felt like mourning. On her last day, the board held a small reception. Margaret gave a speech about integrity and leadership. Jennifer presented her with a plaque that Evelyn knew she'd never hang on a wall. Thomas shook her hand and told her she'd be missed. They were being kind because kindness was expected. But Evelyn could see the relief in their eyes. She was the reminder of everything that had gone wrong, and getting rid of her meant they could finally move forward. She left at 5 o'clock, carrying a box of personal items that felt inadequate for 7 years of work. Miranda walked her to the elevator. This isn't fair, Miranda said. Life rarely is. What are you going to do? Honestly, I have no idea. Sleep late, read books that aren't about market analysis, figure out who I am when I'm not running a company. That sounds incredibly boring. Probably. I'll let you know. They hugged, and Evelyn stepped into the elevator. As the doors closed, she took one last look at the executive floor, the glass walls, the conference rooms, the view of the city that had been hers for so long. Then the elevator descended, and it was over. She drove home through rush hour traffic, suddenly aware of how many other people were doing the same thing. Thousands of cars, thousands of lives, all moving through the city like blood through veins. She'd spent so long viewing the world from the 42nd floor that she'd forgotten what it looked like from ground level. Her phone rang as she pulled into her parking garage. Unknown number. Evelyn Cross. Ms. Cross, this is Janet Morrison from the Chicago Business Association. I'm calling to see if you'd be interested in speaking at our annual leadership conference in June. We're looking for speakers who can address ethical challenges in corporate governance, and your name came up repeatedly. Evelyn sat in her car, engine off, staring at nothing. I'm not sure I'm the right person. I'm not exactly a leadership success story right now. With respect, Ms. Cross, I disagree. You exposed a fraud that could have destroyed your company, even though it cost you your position. That's exactly the kind of leadership we need people to see. Not the glossy success stories, but the hard choices that come with real integrity. Can I think about it? Of course. But I hope you'll say yes. We need more people willing to show that doing the right thing doesn't always have a happy ending. Sometimes it just has an honest one. After they hung up, Evelyn sat in the dim garage for a long time. Maybe Janet was right. Maybe there was value in telling the story, not as a cautionary tale, but as a reminder that sometimes the right choice and the easy choice were different things. Her phone buzzed. Liam. Sophie wants to know if you're free for dinner tomorrow. Fair warning, she's going to ask you approximately 1,000 questions about space travel, and I have no idea why she thinks you're an expert. Evelyn smiled. Tell her I'm free and I'll do my best to fake it. You're a CEO. You're used to faking expertise. Former CEO. I'm officially unemployed as of 3 hours ago. Even better. No meetings to rush off to. Be here at 6. The next evening, Evelyn drove to an address in Logan Square that turned out to be a third-floor walk-up in a building that had seen better days. Liam answered the door with a dishcloth over his shoulder and what looked like tomato sauce on his shirt. Fair warning, he said. I'm not a great cook, but Sophie insisted we make you dinner instead of ordering out. What are we having? Spaghetti. From a jar, with garlic bread that may or may not be burned. Sounds perfect. Sophie appeared behind him, a small whirlwind of energy with dark hair and 2 braids, and her father's serious eyes. Are you Evelyn? I am. Dad says you caught a bad guy who was stealing. Evelyn glanced at Liam, who shrugged. She asked. I gave her the age-appropriate version. Were you scared? Sophie asked. Sometimes. Mostly I was just angry. Dad says being angry is okay, as long as you don't let it make you mean. Did you get mean? I tried not to, but sometimes when you're trying to stop bad things, you have to be tough. And people don't always like that. Sophie considered this. I get in trouble at school sometimes for being tough, but usually it's because someone was being mean to my friend Aisha, and I told them to stop. That sounds like being tough for the right reasons. That's what Dad says. But Mrs. Martinez says I should tell a teacher instead of handling it myself. Mrs. Martinez is probably right, Evelyn said, but I understand why you did it anyway. Sophie beamed, and Evelyn felt something shift in her chest. This kid barely knew her, but she'd already decided Evelyn was worth defending. It was humbling in a way she hadn't expected. Dinner was exactly as advertised. Spaghetti from a jar, slightly burned garlic bread, and a salad that Sophie had apparently made herself with lots of vegetables chopped into wildly different sizes. It was the best meal Evelyn had eaten in months. Sophie did indeed ask approximately 1,000 questions, most of them about space travel, but some of them about Evelyn's job, about Chicago, about what it was like being in charge of a big building. Liam tried to redirect her a few times, but Evelyn didn't mind. Sophie's questions were honest and curious, not the loaded political inquiries she was used to fielding. After dinner, Sophie showed her a project she'd made about the solar system, complete with hand-drawn planets and facts she'd researched herself. Then she announced she had homework and disappeared into her room, leaving Evelyn and Liam to clean up. "Sorry about the interrogation," Liam said, scraping plates. "She gets excited about new people." "Don't apologize. She's great. You've done a good job with her." "I'm winging it most of the time, but she makes it easier than it should be." They worked in comfortable silence for a few minutes. Then Evelyn said, "I got offered a speaking gig, leadership conference in June." "You taking it?" "I don't know. Part of me wants to move on, stop talking about the scandal, stop being defined by it. But another part thinks maybe there's value in telling people that doing the right thing doesn't always save your career." "What does your gut say?" "My gut says I'm tired of being the cautionary tale. But maybe that's exactly why I should do it. Because if I can't face my own story, how can I expect anyone else to learn from it?" Liam dried his hands and leaned against the counter. "Can I tell you something? The day after you exposed Richard, I was in the break room and I heard two guys talking. They were maintenance, like me. One of them said he'd been asked to fudge some inspection reports to make the building look better than it was. He'd been planning to do it because his supervisor asked. But then he saw what happened with you and Richard, and he decided to file an honest report instead. Got written up for it. But he said it was worth it because at least he could sleep at night." Evelyn felt her throat tighten. "I didn't know that." "You wouldn't. He doesn't know you. Probably never will. But you changed what he was willing to do. That's worth something." One person. One person you know about. How many others did you reach that you'll never hear from?" Liam met her eyes. "You think you lost. But from where I'm standing, you won. Maybe not the way you wanted, but you won anyway." That night, Evelyn drove home through streets that felt different somehow. Or maybe she was the one who felt different. She'd spent so long measuring success by titles and quarterly earnings that she'd forgotten there were other metrics, other ways of mattering. She pulled up the email about the speaking engagement and typed a response. "I'd be honored to speak at your conference. I may not have all the answers, but I can share what I learned. Sometimes that's enough." Over the next few months, Evelyn built a new life. She spoke at the conference and was surprised by the response. Not the polite corporate applause she'd expected, but genuine interest. People wanted to hear about the messy parts, the mistakes, the moments when doing the right thing felt impossible. She took consulting jobs with companies that needed someone to audit their financial controls, someone who knew what fraud looked like from the inside. She started writing about corporate ethics, about the small warning signs that preceded big scandals, about building cultures where people felt safe speaking up. And she spent time with Liam and Sophie. Dinners that turned into a regular thing, weekend trips to museums and parks, slow, ordinary moments that felt extraordinary because she was finally present for them. In July, she got a call from Margaret Voss. "The board would like to offer you a position," Margaret said without preamble. "I'm not interested in coming back. Not as CEO. As chair of our new Ethics and Compliance Committee. We're implementing reforms, real ones, and we need someone who understands both the business and the cost of getting it wrong. Someone the employees trust." Evelyn was quiet for a moment. "Why me? You fired me." "We asked you to resign because we needed to move forward. But that doesn't mean we didn't recognize what you did. You saved this company, Evelyn, and we're asking you to help us make sure nothing like this ever happens again." "What would the role entail?" "Independent oversight of all major financial decisions. Direct reporting to the board, not through the CEO. Authority to investigate any concerns brought by employees, no matter how small. And the power to stop any deal or decision that doesn't pass ethical scrutiny." It was everything she'd wanted when she was CEO. The authority to actually prevent fraud, not just react to it. But it came without the glory, without the corner office, without the prestige. "I'll need to think about it," she said. "Take your time." "But Evelyn, we're serious about this. The company needs you, just in a different capacity than before." That evening, she met Liam at the same coffee shop where they'd talked after the board meeting. He listened as she explained the offer, not interrupting, just letting her work through it out loud. "So what do you think?" she asked when she finished. "I think it's not about what I think. It's about what you want. I want to matter. I want to do work that makes a difference. But I don't know if going back is moving forward or just retreating to what's comfortable." "Is it comfortable? Going back to the place that asked you to leave?" "No, it's terrifying. Then maybe that's how you know it's the right choice. The comfortable thing would be staying away, building a new life completely separate from that building. The hard thing is going back and trying to fix what's broken. Evelyn thought about the maintenance worker who'd filed an honest report, about the employees who'd thanked her for exposing Richard, about all the people who showed up every day trusting that someone was looking out for them. If I do this, she said slowly, I want you there too, not as maintenance, as part of the compliance team, someone who knows how to spot problems before they become disasters. Evelyn, I'm serious. You have better instincts than half the executives I've worked with. You see patterns, you ask questions, you don't ignore things just because they're inconvenient. That's exactly what this kind of work needs. I don't have the credentials. You have something better. You have integrity, and you can learn the rest. She leaned forward. I can't do this alone, Liam. I need someone I trust, someone who'll tell me when I'm wrong, someone who cares more about doing the right thing than protecting their position. That's you. Liam was quiet for a long time. Then he said, I'd have to check with Sophie's school about the schedule, and I'd need actual training, not just thrown in and expected to figure it out. We'll make it work, whatever you need. And if it doesn't work out, if I'm terrible at this, then we figure something else out. But I don't think you'll be terrible. I think you'll be exactly what this company needs. He smiled. You're very stubborn, you know that? I've been told. All right, I'm in. But you have to come to Sophie's birthday party next month. She's been planning it for weeks, and she specifically told me to invite you. Deal. They shook on it, and for the second time in 6 months, Evelyn felt like she was building something real. Not perfect, not easy, but honest. In September, Evelyn walked back into the building she'd left 4 months earlier. The security guards recognized her and smiled. The receptionist welcomed her back. People stopped her in the hallways to say they were glad she'd returned. Her office was smaller now, on the 38th floor instead of the 42nd. But it had a window, and it was hers. Liam's desk was right outside, close enough that they could talk through problems without scheduling meetings. The work was harder than she'd expected. Implementing real oversight meant challenging decisions, asking uncomfortable questions, sometimes telling powerful people no. But she'd learned that uncomfortable was where real change happened. Comfortable was where fraud festered. 3 months after she started, an employee came to her with concerns about a vendor contract that didn't add up. The numbers looked fine on paper, but something felt wrong. Evelyn and Liam investigated and found a kickback scheme that would have cost the company hundreds of thousands over the next year. They shut it down, and the employee who'd reported it was protected, not punished. That winter, Evelyn stood at her office window watching snow fall over Chicago. The city looked clean and new under the white blanket, like it was starting over. Liam knocked on her doorframe. Got a minute? Always. What's up? I just got off the phone with someone from the building trades union. They want to know if we'd be willing to do a training session on fraud detection for their members. Apparently word got around about what we're doing here, and they want their workers to know what to look for. Evelyn felt a smile spread across her face. Tell them yes. When do they want us? Next month. And Evelyn? This is working. What we're building here, it's actually working. Yeah, she said, looking out at the snow. It is. That evening, she went to Liam's apartment for dinner. They'd moved to a bigger place in October, a 2-bedroom with actual space and a backyard that Sophie was already planning to turn into a garden come spring. Sophie ran to the door when she arrived. Evelyn, guess what? I got an A on my science project. That's amazing. What was it about? Systems thinking. How small things can affect big things, like how one bee can't pollinate a whole field, but lots of bees working together can. Dad said that's like what you do at work. Evelyn looked at Liam, who shrugged. She asked what systems thinking meant. I did my best. I think that's exactly what it means, Evelyn said to Sophie. One person can't fix everything, but lots of people paying attention, speaking up, doing the right thing even when it's hard, that can change everything. Over dinner, homemade this time and only slightly burned, Sophie talked about her plans for the garden, about her friends at school, about the book she was reading about Mars exploration. Liam told them about a maintenance call he'd responded to that morning, how spotting a small electrical fault had prevented a much bigger problem. And Evelyn realized this was what she'd been missing all those years on the 42nd floor. Not the view or the power or the prestige. Just this, sitting around a table with people who cared about her, talking about ordinary things, being part of something real. After dinner, Sophie fell asleep on the couch during a movie. Liam carefully picked her up and carried her to bed. When he came back, he found Evelyn standing at the window, looking out at the city lights. "You okay?" he asked. "Yeah, just thinking." About? About how a year ago I was sleeping in my office, convinced I had to carry everything alone. And now I'm here, and I'm not carrying it alone anymore. And somehow everything's better even though nothing went the way I planned. Liam came to stand beside her. Sometimes the best things are the ones we didn't plan for. "Is this one of those things?" she asked, looking at him. "I think it might be." They stood there for a moment, close enough that Evelyn could feel the warmth of him, could see the smile lines around his eyes that came from years of finding reasons to be grateful even when things were hard. "I'm not very good at this," she said. "The personal stuff. I spent so long being the CEO that I forgot how to just be a person." "You're doing fine." "I don't know what I'm doing." "Neither do I, but we can figure it out together. That's kind of what we do." Evelyn thought about the server they'd moved, the fraud they'd exposed, the company they were helping rebuild. All of it started with a maintenance worker who'd fixed her heat and left his jacket because she looked cold, because he'd noticed what everyone else had missed, because he'd cared when he had no reason to. "Thank you," she said. "For what?" "For seeing me, not the CEO, not the title, not the performance, just me. And for not walking away even when it would have been easier. You did the same for me. You saw someone worth more than fixing pipes and stuck valves. That matters." Spring came early that year. By April, the snow was gone and the city was blooming. Sophie's garden started producing tomatoes and herbs that she insisted on using in every meal. Liam got promoted to senior compliance analyst, a title he said made him sound way more important than he was. And Evelyn kept doing the work. Training sessions, investigations, building systems that made it easier to speak up and harder to hide fraud. It wasn't glamorous. It didn't come with a corner office or a salary that made her wealthy. But it mattered. She could see it in the employees who came to her with concerns, in the contractors who knew they'd be treated fairly, in the gradual shift toward a culture where integrity wasn't just a word in the company handbook. One evening in May, she got a call from Richard Chen's lawyer. "My client would like to speak with you," he said. "Why?" "He's cooperating with federal prosecutors. Part of his plea agreement requires making amends where possible. He'd like to apologize." Evelyn almost said no, but curiosity won out. "When?" "Tomorrow, if you're available. The federal detention center downtown." The next day, she sat across from Richard Chen in a room that smelled like disinfectant and desperation. He looked older, diminished somehow without the expensive suits and the confidence that came from power. "Thank you for coming," he said. Evelyn didn't respond. "I'm not going to make excuses," Richard continued. "What I did was wrong. I stole from the company. I manipulated the merger documents. I tried to destroy evidence. And when you caught me, I tried to destroy you too. I'm sorry." "Are you? Or are you just saying that because your lawyer told you to?" "Both, probably. But that doesn't make it less true." He looked down at his hands. "I told myself I deserved the money, that I'd worked hard, that the company owed me, that everyone else was doing it, so why shouldn't I? But the truth is I was just greedy, and I was willing to hurt a lot of people to get what I wanted." "Why are you telling me this?" "Because you destroyed your career to stop me. And I need you to know it wasn't for nothing. What you did, it changed things. Not just in the company, but in me. I have a lot of time to think in here, and I keep coming back to that board meeting. The look on your face when you presented the evidence. You weren't angry or triumphant. You just looked sad, like you'd lost something important." "I lost my job, my reputation, 7 years of work. But you kept your integrity, and I'm starting to realize that's worth more than anything I stole." He met her eyes. "I know this doesn't fix anything, but I wanted you to know that what you did mattered. It mattered to me." Evelyn stood up. "I hope you mean that, because a lot of people got hurt by what you did, and saying sorry doesn't undo that damage." "I know, but it's a start." She left without saying anything else. On the drive home, she thought about Richard's words, about whether people could really change, whether remorse was genuine or just another performance. She didn't have answers, but maybe that was okay. Maybe it was enough to have done the right thing and trust that the consequences, whatever they were, would sort themselves out. That weekend, she and Liam took Sophie to the lakefront. They walked along the shore, Sophie running ahead to collect interesting rocks, while Evelyn and Liam followed at a slower pace. Richard apologized, Evelyn said. How'd that feel? Anticlimactic. I wanted it to fix something, to give me closure, but it just felt empty. Maybe because the closure doesn't come from him. It comes from you deciding to move on. Have you moved on? From when his fraud almost cost you your job? I'm working on it. Some days are easier than others. Liam picked up a smooth stone and turned it over in his hands. But I figure if I spend all my time being angry about what almost happened, I miss what's actually happening. And what's happening is pretty good. Sophie ran back with a pocket full of rocks, insisting they help her identify each one. They sat on the grass and went through them one by one, making up ridiculous names when they didn't know the real ones. Granite became sparkle stone, limestone became moon rock, and a piece of broken glass became treasure from the lake pirates. Watching Sophie's face light up with each new discovery, Evelyn realized Liam was right. This was what mattered. Not the apologies or the closure or the perfect ending, just this. Sitting on the grass with people she cared about, making up stories about rocks, being present for the small moments that added up to a life. As summer arrived, the company continued its slow recovery. The stock price returned to pre-scandal levels. New contracts were signed. The culture shifted toward transparency and accountability, not because someone mandated it, but because people saw the value in speaking up. In June, Evelyn spoke at 3 conferences about corporate ethics. In July, she testified before a congressional committee about financial oversight. In August, she turned down a CEO position at another company because it would have meant leaving the work she was building in Chicago. And through it all, Liam was there. Not as her assistant or her employee, but as her partner in rebuilding something better than what had been broken. On a warm evening in September, exactly a year after she'd returned to the company, Evelyn stood at her office window watching the sun set over Chicago. The city stretched out beneath her, a million lives intersecting in ways they'd never fully understand. Liam knocked on her doorframe. Ready to go. Where are we going? Sophie's school thing. Remember? She's getting an award for her community service project. Evelyn smiled. Right. The one about teaching younger kids systems thinking? That's the one. She's been practicing her speech all week. Fair warning, it's mostly about bees and gardens, but there's a part about how her dad's friend Evelyn helped stop bad people by noticing small problems before they became big ones. She's talking about me. You're her hero. She's been telling everyone at school about the woman who caught the thief. They drove to Sophie's school together, arriving just as parents were filing into the auditorium. Sophie spotted them from the stage and waved enthusiastically. When it was her turn to speak, she walked to the microphone with the same serious expression her father wore when he was focused on a problem. Systems thinking means understanding how small things connect to big things, Sophie read from her note cards. Like how my dad noticed that a broken heating valve meant someone in the building was cold, and that small observation led to finding out that someone was stealing from the whole company. And now my dad and his friend Evelyn work together to find small problems before they become big ones. And that's what I want to do too. I want to pay attention to small things and help fix them before they hurt people. The audience applauded, but Evelyn barely heard it. She was too busy trying not to cry in an elementary school auditorium. After the ceremony, Sophie ran over to them. Did you hear my speech? We did, Evelyn said. It was perfect. Mrs. Chen said I need to work on my public speaking, but I think I did okay. You did better than okay. You did great. They took Sophie out for ice cream to celebrate, and Evelyn listened as Sophie explained her next project, something about community gardens and how they could help with food insecurity. Liam tried to rein in her ambition, suggesting maybe they start with one garden before planning a whole network, but Sophie was undeterred. Walking back to the car, Sophie between them holding both their hands, Evelyn realized something. This was it. This was the ending she'd been looking for. Not dramatic or cinematic, not tied up with a perfect bow, just ordinary and real and exactly right. The building where she'd spent so many years still stood on the 42nd floor. But she wasn't up there anymore, isolated in a corner office, carrying everything alone. She was down here, walking through the city with people who saw her, challenged her, cared about her. And for the first time in longer than she could remember, Evelyn Cross wasn't planning the next move or strategizing the next crisis. She was just here, in this moment, grateful for the maintenance worker who'd noticed she was cold and left his jacket. Because sometimes the smallest acts of kindness are the ones that change everything.